Hey guys, it's Gala Avery from the Video Archives podcast. While we're shuffling tapes and gearing up for season 2, Quentin and Roger have sent me on a mission all around Los Angeles and beyond to talk with filmmakers, photographers, VHS collectors, and other interesting characters. What are we going to be talking about? Well, that's up for my guests to decide. On the Gala show, guests have 30 minutes to talk about whatever topic they want you to know about. Filmmakers like Josh Miller will tell us how he found his tribe, while writers like Larry Karaszewski will let you know what he considers to be a true LA movie. VHS collectors like Connor Holt make an argument for the genre of pirate movies, while writers like Josh Olson are going to let us in on what he considers to be right-wing cinema. Actors like Percy Hines White will share his love of outsider art, while animators and cartoonist Sierra Nielli will reminisce on his experiences of growing up in a Philly pizza shop and how this time in his life influenced him to pick up a pencil. So, join me every Thursday for a new guest with an entirely new topic. The Gala show premieres October 26th, available wherever you get your podcasts. On this episode of the Video Archives podcast, they called it an accident. He called it a murder. It was their conspiracy. It was his son. Join Roger and Quentin as they're filled with rage after watching the injustice that one father faces in Rage by George C. Scott. The duo talks about what happens when the class system fails, George C. Scott's connection to Kubrick, and what a man will do when he has nothing left to lose. Next, the motion picture with something to offend everyone, at least in 1965, Tony Richardson's The Loved One. A blistering black comedy in its day, The Loved One pulls no punches when it comes to paralleling the mortuary business with Hollywood. Roger and Quentin discuss a star-studded supporting cast, the magic of a real change, and the everlasting influence that Tony Richardson had on Roger. And remember, kids, it's not a rocket. Finally, a movie that you haven't seen but you'll want to find. Roger and Quentin sing a song for a little sparrow in William A. Graham's 1972 Cry for Me, Billy. We'll learn what makes a 1970s Western unique and talk about the bravery of an actress who bears it all. Trust me, guys, this widely unknown film is the perfect watch for any true cineast. I'm Gala Avery, and joining us now, here's Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery.
And thank you, Gala. Welcome to the Video Archives podcast. I am Roger Avery.
I'm Quentin Tarantino.
And this week we have 3 films. Well, let's begin with the first film that we saw, the film that I had never seen before that you pulled and showed me, which is Rage from 1972 with George C. Scott and directed by George C. Scott.
Yeah, and by the way, I think I deserve a little bit of credit because I put together the movies to watch. I have a good idea of what I'm going to show, but I always leave it open for chance or for serendipity or impulse, whatever. However, 2 of the prerequisites that I have is that I at least show at least one movie that I haven't seen.
Yeah.
But then also I try to pick something that I think is a Roger movie. Either something you've said you wanted to see or something I know you like or something is in your wheelhouse.
Or something that you know will trigger me.
Yeah. So The Loved One coming up is definitely the Roger movie. That's for sure. You've been waiting to do this for like a long time.
You know how much I love that movie.
However, I want some credit for choosing Roger movies that Roger doesn't even know about. Roger doesn't even know they're Roger movies until he watches the unknown movie and goes, oh my God, this is a total fucking Roger movie. And I think even more than The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, Rage is a total Roger movie.
Rage is a complete Roger movie. You know, I in the early days of OpenAI, as you know, I was an early tester of it. And so I created an AI version of Roger Avery. And what OpenAI does is it basically uses the availability of Roger Avery on the internet and, you know, the sum total of that. And it culls together all of that knowledge. And then it creates sort of using language processors, a sort of version of me and of what it presumes. Well, it turns out there's another Roger Avery, a professor of sociology at Brown University. And so it kind of conflated the 2 of us together. And the AI, Roger Avery, has seen a number of movies that I haven't seen, that I should have seen. And I'm fairly certain the AI Roger Avery has seen Rage. So I'm going to read the box. First of all, I just have to say this Warner Brothers, Warner Home Video box with George C. Scott
By the way, it was
truly raging on the cover. It looks like his head is disconnected from his body. He's raging so intensely.
Absolutely. And by the way, rage would be taken from the drama section under the R's.
Yeah, and they actually call it the adult section on the side of the box. They mean drama. Mm-hmm. They mean this is for adults.
But actually, this is not a Video Archives video cassette. I was visiting a friend making a movie in Detroit, and they took me to the biggest video store in Detroit, Michigan, and it was closing, but they were having a closing out sale. And they weren't selling their shit cheap either, by the way, comparing to how some of this stuff is. They're like $54, $60 or whatever. It's out of print. Well, like anybody cares. But I was like, I had the money, so I bought a lot of shit. And one of the ones I bought was Rage. So that actually comes from this huge video store in Detroit.
So this is George C. Scott's first film as a director.
Mm-hmm.
The tagline on the box is, "An embittered father blows the lid off a government cover-up. His son is dead. He's dying. Overnight. Dan Logan's peaceful world has been shattered, and the only thing Dan has left is rage. A military installation has accidentally dumped a fatal dose of experimental nerve gas over Logan's Wyoming ranch and purposefully dropped a veil of secrecy over the incident." That's in quotes. With no one to turn to for help, Logan becomes both judge and executioner. George C. Scott, an Academy Award winner for Patton, stars both before and behind the camera in this blistering thriller. As Logan, the embittered father who sets out on a hell-bent rampage of revenge, Scott adds another brilliant, bone-deep performance to his impressive list of screen successes. And as a debuting director, Scott draws equally riveting portrayals from his skilled supporting cast, including Richard Basehart, Bernard Hughes, and a young Martin Sheen in one of his first major film roles as the cool, manipulative medical specialist whose specialty is deception. Like The China Syndrome and Warning Sign, Rage is an uncompromising story that's as terrifyingly vivid as today's headlines. Rage, said Los Angeles Times, quote, "really is enraged. A powerhouse polemic against the kind of military industrial shenanigans which makes the fiction so appallingly close to the truth."
Where did you get the word appealing in there?
Well, they broke up appalling, and they cut it in and so it's sort of and then it like dash ling, and I am aging.
But it actually, but actually, the tomfoolery involved does make the drama appealing.
Yeah, actually, that is essentially what the movie is what is running amok other than chaotic tomfoolery?
But actually, the running amok actually is secondary to the frustration of the cover-up.
Oh, yeah.
That is the length of the movie. I mean, one of the things that you said that I thought was so funny that prompted half of my setup. We're watching the movie, we're like an hour into it or something, and you go, this movie is either the best movie for paranoid people or the worst movie. This is either the best movie ever made for a paranoid audience or the worst movie ever made for a paranoid audience.
That might be a good place to get into my capsule review.
Okay, yes.
Which technically is written in the voice of Franklin Browner or in the voice of
Bill Margold.
Bill Margold, but this one's clearly from me.
Mm-hmm.
Showing me this film in the year 2022 is akin to throwing gasoline on fire. And you knew that. You know damn well that I'm a conspiracy theorist whose most paranoid conceptions and conceits have been recently realized as true. Noah Webster had no definition for paranoia in 1828. It was a later invention made by others with a different agenda. The Merriam brothers defined paranoia as the unwanted or delusional belief that one is being persecuted, harassed, or betrayed by others, occurring as part of a mental condition. Well, sir, in the absence of a mental condition in this film, paranoia is better defined as ultimate awareness. One doesn't need a star chamber, a Bohemian Grove, a Skull and Bones, nor Davos and the lizards who attend the World Economic Forum. One doesn't need a cabal, even, for a conspiracy of the dutiful to occur. This is how systems fail humanity, in their effort to serve. George C. Scott worked with Stanley Kubrick on Dr. Strangelove, and from all accounts, the two became very close. One can feel Kubrick's strong thematic influence as Scott's sheep rancher character is stripped of his stock, his livelihood, his family, his pets, and ultimately his life, with no one directly nor singularly culpable for the crime. Should it come as any shock to any of us when a man stripped of everything he loves that he does anything other than run amok? Is that insanity or something more predictable? It was Shakespeare and Othello who wrote, "Men in rage strike those that wish them the best." 1972.
That's my favorite Frank Brunner review. That was really good. Because it was just Roger sounding more pompous than normal.
I figured Franklin Browner is a little bit of a pompous ass.
Yeah, exactly.
He's also got a lot of my qualities.
He's also damn correct.
Well, that's the thing about this movie is that I'm watching it and I'm thinking, okay, so this has been going on forever. And all the characters are there. All the kind of familiar characters we've seen wandering across our television screens for the last couple of years. They're there. George C. Scott, saw them back then and, they've been around forever.
Look, the idea of the story is George C. Scott is a sheep farmer living out in Wyoming with his son. Real man of the earth. And him and his son spend a night out camping during the course of the night. There's a local military base in town, and the government is testing a nerve gas that they have. Now, there is a big conspiracy and a cover-up that happens, but it's the cover-up that's the crime. The actual crime that actually ends up killing people is a legitimate mistake that happens, and they do a really good job of explaining that. They were testing the nerve gas in an area that was completely unpopulated. However, there was 10 minutes where the valve was on open
when it should have been closed.
They didn't know about it. And so there's
a genuine mistake, actually. They make a point of that in the film that it's happened and the government is even saying, shouldn't we have safeties on this?
Yeah. Shouldn't we have things that have a safeguard against this? Well, yes, we do have airplanes
we've started implementing that, but it wasn't on this.
But you still have us using a few planes that are not equipped with that function. And that is this case now.
That's just the reality of things.
And the gas is maybe only going for maybe 4 minutes or so. All right. I think at the end of the day,
it doesn't even reach the town, but it gets close enough.
Yeah. Maybe that runs about 45 miles or something like that. All right. In the course of time. But George C. Scott and his son are smack dab in that area. Now, George C. Scott slept in the tent. The son slept outside. So he wakes up the next morning and all his sheep are passed out.
Yeah, he comes out of his tent. His son has been sleeping outside.
Yeah, it comes out of his tent. All his sheep are knocked out, all with blood coming out of their nose. And there's his son knocked out, all with blood coming out of his nose. Oh my God, what the hell is going on? So he scoops him up.
In a really riveting moment where it's so realistic. And I was just thinking about the desperation that a father has in a moment like that, where he picks up his son and he then has to run from their campsite to the road, which I'm guessing, they're sheep herders.
Which is a long ways away because they went camping.
He has to run through a levee. He's got to run up a hill.
They're camping. They're not camping by the car, all right?
Carrying this kid, and you feel the
agony.
In agony, in desperation, in a long, wide shot.
And George C. Scott is the kind of guy that, his whole thing is volcanic eruption, coming from underneath. And so it's like a death mask face, as he's carrying his son and it's heavy.
Well, a man who's carrying a lot of weight in his soul, which I think he really was from being in war.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The way he establishes the connection that he has with his son, but not in corny ways, not in any scenes that are written to show them finishing each other's sentences or them enjoying each other's quirky humor. They're not those kind of people. He's a sheep rancher. He's not a poet laureate. He's not going to wear his emotions on his sleeve.
No, the most they do is they appreciate nature together.
Yes,
the kid finds a centipede or a millipede or something.
Yeah, he's a very masculine man who has taught his son masculine traits, and his son actually appreciates them.
He's learning from him.
Yeah, his son actually he
admires him and he looks up to him. It's a perfect father-son relationship.
It is, but it is one that is not verbal.
Yeah.
I really liked his son. As little dialogue as he had, it didn't matter.
Yeah, it felt real.
It felt real. And then but again, there's a class issue that really, I think, gets to the viewer in a big, big, big way. George C. Scott doesn't know what to do. He's not a doctor. And so he goes immediately to the doctors that he knows.
To the hospital. And
the hospital, the doctor,
family doctor.
The family doctor.
They're in a small town.
Yeah, played by Richard Basehart, who I think is fantastic in the movie. Yeah. I think he's wonderful in the film. his character is revealed more and more as the movie goes on.
The more under conflict he becomes,
and
the greater the turbulence within him.
Yeah, and the more that's revealed, the more your heart goes out to him. He is cut from a same cloth of George C. Scott. He's a simple doctor dealing with simple problems in this Wyoming community. And so when he's faced with what's going on, he naturally goes to the higher medical authorities involved in this hospital and in this military situation, and they talk over his head the way they talk over George C. Scott's head. But everyone just kind of figures, well, of course we don't understand this. This is all over our heads, but they know what's going on, and they'll tell us what is best to do.
Because we, as Americans, are trusting of authority.
Especially medical authority. Especially medical and legal authority. All right. And you can even disagree with legal authority to some degree, but normally you feel like a crackpot if you're disagreeing with a doctor. I
was getting weird shades of Coma as I was watching this. I was,
yeah, but
having
frankly,
the after image of Coma.
Yes. Okay. But I can poke a zillion holes in the conspiracy theory that is supposedly Coma. I can't poke any holes in this. This is tight as a fucking drum.
There is
in a disturbing way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing they tell George C. Scott would ring even the slightest bell in a drama if we weren't watching a paranoid thriller called Rage, where we know they're taking advantage of him, and we know they're culpable, and we know that it's all about the cover-up so they don't get blamed for this murder.
The first moment that we know, I mean, other than the fact that there's, been helicopters flying around and suddenly, the sheep are all dead and his son is bleeding from the nose, is when his doctor is talking to Martin Sheen, who plays kind of the young, smarmy, former military.
Literally, I mean, in some little ways, it's one of my favorite Martin Sheen performances of all time. He is the face of banal evil. I mean, far more so than
evil. Dutiful evil.
Nobody in Coma comes across in the evil, bland way that Martin Sheen does in this film.
And the most insidious moment with him for me, perhaps other than the autopsy, is the moment where he shakes the hand of the good doctor, of George C. Scott's doctor, and he does kind of this weird handshake. I don't know if it's a military handshake.
That's a weird part of the film, because that makes you suspect Richard Basehart far longer than the movie bears out.
Well, that's okay to do, though. That's not so weird.
But that sounds like a movie. But that sounds like a movie thing for us to be suspicious about shit.
Well, I read it as like a kind of you and I are part of a club, a higher authority, and you and I need to speak separately. And so I'm giving you a secret sign, which is basically what that is. It's a secret handshake. It's a secret sign, whether it's a real secret handshake or just a way for him to say, hey, I need to talk to you in secret.
Look, I agree with everything you just said, but they muddied the water as far as Richard Basehart's intentionality.
For sure.
For the first half of the fucking movie.
It's a MacGuffin or whatever. It's because I actually thought he was part of it to begin with. And then I thought, oh, no, he's really close to him. And then there was that moment between doctors. But then what he does, I think, as an actor is so just beautiful to watch. This inner turmoil that he's under, this conflict that he's under, that he's not okay with. And you can tell he's not okay with it if you know to look. If you watch it again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Everybody's amazing in this film. And you can see why
agree.
Martin Sheen would show up in this movie and everybody would be like, Martin Sheen.
Yeah. He's fantastic. And he's always been really sweet about George C. Scott. He's actually, back when he would do talk shows and stuff in the 70s, about how George C. Scott really, gave him one of his bigger roles early coming up. And it was like a big deal when they actually did Firestarter together. They got a chance to act together again.
That's right. They worked together in Firestarter. I mean, I think I mentioned to you DOA as a kind of, that this is part of that subgenre of man is already dead on a Revenge-O-Matic.
Which, by the way, I would not mind watching the Dennis Quaid DOA.
Oh, yeah, the one by Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel.
Yeah, I've always had an appreciation for that movie.
Yeah. The thing is, the one guy, the doctor, who has clearly been lying to him,
Bernard Hughes,
who's been overseeing his son's vivisection, who has just been lying to him and has been punting, knowing that he's going to die. George C. Scott seems like such a solid man that it was like he didn't want to show the killing of the doctor, or maybe he doesn't kill the doctor. Whichever it was, I think he leaves it up to us to decide. It's up to us to choose what happened. In my mind, he could only have killed that doctor.
I think he did.
He's running amok. He kills a lot of lesser people in this, and when he's killing people, it seems like my only problem is that some poor cop shows up on the scene, is like, may I help you, sir? And he gets shot in the head by George C. Scott.
Yeah,
but he never quite gets to Martin Sheen.
Well, I don't have a problem with that because he gets to the guy he can get to, which is Bernard Hughes.
Yeah, and he fucks up their entire operation.
Yeah, but that would be too revenge-matic movie convenient for him to literally get to Martin Sheen and all the other people on the chain.
He definitely shows
the hypotheses of the movie.
The futility
that he can only vent his spleen against functionaries.
Yeah, and that does seem what it's like. It's like he rages against the building. Mm-hmm. He rages against the cops.
And he ravages the building, no doubt about that.
Oh, no, he does a number on that building.
He rains hell on the institution, which is the real culprit in this, because every member of this institution thinks that they're doing the institution's bidding and thinks that they're doing the public good.
Yeah, everyone has good intentions. Mm-hmm. Everyone is trying to do their job. Nobody is necessarily fronted as evil so much, except for the doctor, who I just feel like is in the greater good, doing a disservice to
frankly,
humanity.
To tell you the truth, one of the interesting things is when he finally has Bernard Hughes under at the end of his rifle. I love when he kills a cat.
Oh yeah,
I
have to say, because you know how much I love cats, and that.
Fuck that cat.
But I have to say, if anything was going to get me to talk, it would have been that. And that cat just and
it does.
That cat.
No, it's why
I was like, there's very few things that would have probably made me talk in that moment.
Yeah.
Blowing away that cat and having it vaporize in front of our eyes.
No, it's actually really
interesting.
It's actually really interesting that's the big violence that actually George C. Scott presents in the movie. And it's actually funny that, obviously that cat had nothing to do with this conspiracy, but it is. But nevertheless, it's cathartic. Nevertheless, you actually feel it in a big way. And as opposed to just killing the doctor and enjoying that because of the doctor's place in it, it always becomes as much deliciously fun as the doctor's entire line of bullshit completely crumbling in front of George C. Scott. Now all of a sudden he's admitting to everything.
Yeah.
And then and he's such a sniveling worm when he does it that actually becomes more so than the murder. That is almost the justification for the revenge-matic onslaught.
Now this movie's edited, am I right, by Michael Kahn?
One who, if you don't know, is one of the great editors in cinema history, and has been Spielberg's after an early part of the 70s, where he's editing for Warner Brothers, especially, is editing Rage. He had his Black Belt Jones. Michael Kahn, sometime after Werner Fields, teams up with Spielberg, and then they edit everything together up to this day.
I'm wondering if George C. Scott let the doctor, the good doctor, or the bad doctor rather, live, and that he just left after that scene, and that Michael Kahn cut that out, and without having him killing him,
to suggest that there's a dot. Wow, that would be clever.
Because I'm thinking that's probably just in my CSI
I think you're right.
analysis of what happened here.
I think that's probably more correct than not. That's probably exactly what happened, and Michael Kahn created a situation that leaves it a ... with a question mark.
And let's talk for a moment about these kind of brilliant but also slightly wonky transitions.
They're not brilliant. They're wonky.
Well, there is something to be said about, in a shot of the present, seeing the shot of the future in the same shot.
Look, there's a lot of things you can describe.
And that's like a cubist shot. And for me, as somebody who appreciates cubism, I was like, listen, I'm not, he overuses it. But there was two moments in there where there
was one of them that worked. I can't remember which one that worked.
There was the one where the truck is driving toward us, and we see, and then the camera pans to the distance, and we see the tent, and they're actually at the tent already, and they zoom in on it. There was that
doesn't ring a bell, but one of them. After none of them working, one worked. That one doesn't ring a bell. All right, of me going eureka. It pretty much plays like George C. Scott is trying to direct a movie, and it's a little bit like, hey, look, Ma, watch me direct, with these weird slow motion shots out of nowhere that tie into a time cut.
I'm going to make sure everything links together. Just like,
and it takes him 45 minutes to 50 minutes before he drops it, but finally he does drop it, thank God.
Well, there are some ridiculous moments, like when he drives by, like where it just suddenly they'll do like a kind of everything, when suddenly it goes into slow motion.
No.
And someone is doing something goofy, like throwing a rock at a post office box.
Yeah.
And that it becomes like kind of some weird transition, or the sheep to dog transition.
That was terrible.
There were some but he's trying. He's doing little forces, and I'm sure Michael Kahn was no small part of that.
Look, the other bad thing he does as a director, because I'm able to notice it because he does it so often, yet there's one time he does it and it actually works. It's like he doesn't really know what to do with the camera. So he starts like a 3-shot of character, 2 shots or 3 shots of characters, and it's going on. And then he just picks one thing to slow zoom into during the course of the scene. Whether it's a dog's face or somebody's face or a fucking TV screen or some shit going on out a window. And he just does it again and again and again. Nevertheless, he does it with Richard Basehart, and it's the time when Richard Basehart is realizing that these people have been giving him double talk, and he actually has not been serving his patients in the correct manner. And it ends on Richard Basehart's face, but it doesn't even end on Richard Basehart's face. It continues on Richard Basehart's face for like another 2 minutes, and Basehart holds it together because we're completely with him. As much as those other shots don't work, this works completely effectively. This is exactly what he meant to do the entire time, and it works really great. But then after that, he drops all that stuff, and now he just actually starts making the movie. Now he's not dealing with perceptions of how cinematically it should play, and he's just actually down to the drama at hand, which is why you want George C. Scott making the movie. Are you on George C. Scott's side from the beginning to the end?
Oh, I am.
No, that was a question. I'm asking you. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I absolutely am. I mean, you know that I'm a family man. Mm-hmm. You know that I am suspicious of systems. Mm-hmm. I'm suspicious of groups of people. Like, I believe that individuals in general, generally speaking, are inherently good in nature. I believe people are born innocent and good. But groups of people, mobs, corporations, collections of people tend to do things that the individual would never do. Mm-hmm. They start working in systems together, and they start working in inhumane systems together. Not to be inhumane, it just happens that way. Mm-hmm. Just mob mentality is one way of putting it. And so any movie that's about the individual, and especially when it's George C. Scott, any movie that's about the who is just at every juncture.
No. Look, watching the movie now, I feel differently than I did before. I mean, having a son now, to understand his confusion and terror when the son's in the truck and he's driving and he in the truck and he's just driving to the hospital. What's going on? I mean, that's just shit-eating and terrifying.
There were 2 things in that moment that just were so real to me, that were like really, really affecting me. One of them was I spoke of already, where he's carrying his son and running. And just how he's doing it, like he's really doing it. Like that's George C. Scott, like carrying that young actor, and he's in it in that moment. And then when they're in the car and he's driving toward, I think it's the hospital, and he's going through the parking lot and he's just leaning on his horn like beep, 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 as he's like roaring through the parking lot, which is like on one hand,
shit-eating panic.
Yeah, you're in panic and you're just like, you don't give a fuck about any of the mores of society, it's like, I'm going to lean on my horn and honk on it, and I'm going to like clip other cars, and I'm going to like drive over. I'm like, my son is dying.
Yeah.
It's primal. And then to have the people you trust slowly erode away, like, just like sand washing away at the ocean. If you take away everything from a man, if you take away all the things he's loved, he's left with nothing. Then all you have left is rage.
Well, I mean, one of the things that very well said, we watched that movie the other day, last week, the Western that Kirk Douglas wrote and directed, Posse, with Bruce Dern. And we described it as a Watergate Western. Now, this movie is made before Watergate, but if it was made in 75 or 76, it would be considered a complete allegory for Watergate, because it covers the Watergate aspect where it's not about the break-in at the hotel, it's about the cover-up. And the evil aspects about everything are all about the cover-up.
Well, it could just as easily have been about Operation Sea Spray in 1950, where the government sprayed bacteria during a warfare test on San Francisco and affected the entire population of San Francisco with all sorts of bacteria. I made a list, from the Tuskegee syphilis study to the Navy-sponsored beef blood transfusions in 1940s, to Willowbrook, to Operation Big Buzz, to the measles vaccine experiments where they were giving drugs. I mean, there is no end to the well-meaning groups of people attempting to do good and bringing about suffering on to many. And Rage captures that because, again, there's not really anybody who's evil. Nobody's really evil. Just everybody thinks they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like we're supposed to stop a public panic, right? We're supposed to, do this, right?
But it's also, it's their constant lying to George C. Scott is what comes across.
Right, but for the
evil.
betterment of the greater good, supposedly.
Well, and
that's what groups of people do that an individual wouldn't do. Like, Richard Basehart, is the good man in this, and even he gets pulled along into the lie to the point where he can't swallow it anymore. He can't live as someone who lies like that to another.
Even though
being.
He calls himself, I'm just a little family doctor or whatever. I'm just a general practitioner. He's the one who knows enough to be able to put two and two together. He's the one that has enough learning when it comes to the medical profession to put two and two together and realize I've been gullible.
Yeah.
I've been gullible and I have not been taking care of my patient in the right way.
Well, and there's no mistake that Martin Sheen at a certain juncture suddenly is wearing a military uniform. That suddenly we realize, wait a minute, he's a military doctor. He's not just the young new doctor. He's literally a military doctor.
If it was the Andromeda strain, he'd be one of the main people. In the
completely.
cast.
And they've got sort of an Anthony Fauci type guy there who's sort of their civilian pragmatic person of, I'm just saying people are going to die. I'm just telling you the facts.
Oh, the Robert Walden character.
Yeah, the Robert Walden. He's wonderful.
Janeway. Yeah, I know he's terrific.
Is that his character's name, Janeway?
Janeway, yeah. He's the Anthony Fauci. Oh, make no mistake. They're all going to die. And I would just wrap this up to just say that George C. Scott's performance is fantastic in this movie. And one of the things that George C. Scott has always been very good at, and I can even point at a couple of other examples, is playing grief. Like, for instance, one of the best capturing of grief that I've ever seen in a movie is a scene in The Changeling. Because in that movie, he loses his wife and kid at the very beginning in an auto accident. And then there's just this moment, you see him, 45 minutes later into the movie, he's in the haunted house and he's crying. It's just in the morning, he's crying. He's just like he misses his wife and son and he's having a crying jack in the morning. And then all of a sudden he starts hearing this boom, boom, boom in the house. And it interrupts his crying jack. You actually see him stop his emotional crying, just like, what the hell is that? And but just him crying alone, apropos of nothing. But we know what he's crying about. He's lost his family. Has always been one of the most powerful demonstrations of mourning and of pain that I've ever seen in a movie. And the same man who did that scene directed this movie and starred in this movie to, I think, a really wonderful degree.
Have you ever wondered what the lead singer of Smash Mouth, Zach Goody, feels about new versus old guys in music and cinema? Or how photographer Toasty Cakes makes his cinematic discoveries? What about the opinion of Rotten Tomatoes editor Jacqueline Coley and what she considers to be the new Hollywood shift of the streaming era? Join me, reporter on the beat Gala Avery, as I get to the bottom of these very questions. Starting on October 26th, I have a new guest on the mic every week. Yes, every Thursday, hear your favorite filmmakers, photographers, actors, models, and more talk about a topic that is near and dear to their heart that they want you to know about. You'd be surprised at what people are interested in. The Gala Show premieres October 26th with new episodes every Thursday, available wherever you get your podcasts. And now, in rebuttal to Quentin Tarantino's editorializing in his new book, Cinema Speculation. Video Archives podcast is proud to present a rebuttal by noted Canadian film critic Franklin Browner.
Hello, friends and fellow cineasts. This is Franklin Browner, formerly the head critic of the Winnipeg City Press, and I will be again once the infernal Freemason Moloch-worshipping cabal that controls Manitoba releases their hermetic stranglehold on my fair city. Until then, I am a critic in exile, but I will always be there for you, the people, and will continue to bring you, the moviegoer, an honest perspective of unshellacked opinion. No corporation owns or controls the opinions of Franklin Browner. I say what I want. And that holds true for today with my review of Quentin Tarantino's new book, Cinema Speculation, a collection of recollections blended with opinions which must be addressed since he is wantonly spreading misinformation about and slander of the great John Boorman's greatest masterwork, Deliverance. He has gone as far as to call this brilliant cornerstone of 70s cinema, I can barely bring myself to say it, pro forma. Oh, the audacity. I feel that Sir John Boorman, a title I have granted him, deserves a champion to step forward and counter this missive from Mr. Tarantino, to stand up in his honor. So here it is. Pro forma. Directly from the Latin, meaning for form's sake, done as a formality. Damn right it's a formality! Even Noah Webster could tell you that cinema has form, and by God, Boorman knows it well enough to bow before it, to bend his knee, to form in deference and respect. Function be damned! John Boorman isn't attempting to make some greasy Hollywood action film just to give the executives at the studio a boner. He aspires to elevate the form to that of literature. But you know what? He also made those money-grubbing studio executives happy. The movie brought in the bucks. The people spoke. They loved Boorman's form. And so did the Academy, who gave their Best Pro Forma award to the film. Deliverance is, and shall always remain, a classic of modern 1970s filmmaking. I don't know why I get so worked up. I suppose it's just that this Quentin Tarantino character is what one might call a bombast, who doesn't know how to stay in his lane. Criticism is for critics. Filmmaking is for artists. Stick to your side of the screen, Mr. Tarantino, where you belong. The deception and lies of cinema is where your strengths rest. Why not leave the analysis and criticism and truth to the critics? It's your job to make the film, to dream the dream, to reap the box office cash. Those in the audience need a proper collusion-free advocate. Don't you feel that being a director, a film director, and a film critic is cinematic double-dipping? I think this punk just enjoys taking a big steaming literary shit all over the previous generation of filmmakers just to elevate his own duplicitous agenda of Filipino chop-sucking nonsense and Italian cop films from the 70s, which no sensible person has heard of. Why? Because they suck, that's why. Watching Deliverance, he's disappointed that Burt Reynolds doesn't have an orangutan in the canoe with him. He'd rather John Voight get into a kung fu fight with the hillbilly retreads. But I suspect he's fine with Ned Beatty getting cornholed like a pregnant sow. Well, I'm here to tell you, good people, Cinema Speculation is a dangerous book. It's in the goddamn title. It undoes cinema with, you guessed it, speculation. And that's exactly why I, Franklin Browner, am making a direct appeal to you, the fans of cinema throughout the world. You must buy this book. You must buy it, and you must read it. And then you must read it again and again until you've memorized its blasphemy. Only then will you be able to properly argue the points this black night of ha-ha, bang-bang movie-making has argued. Only then, when confronted by one of his many minions, will you be able to sit together over coffee and discuss the future and the past of cinema well enough and well-informed with polite discourse. On guard, I say. This is Franklin Browner, formerly the head critic of the Winnipeg City Press, signing off and wishing you and yours an enjoyable and enriching night at the movies.
Video Archives podcast recognizes its responsibility to present contrary opinions from responsible advocates.
And we're back. And we are joined by the lovely Gala Avery, who is here to give her take on the films, but also she serves a function because, like the rest of you out in podcast land, she does not have access to the Video Archives collection. So it's her job to persevere to track down these films however she can, whether it's on video or DVD or streaming or whatever. And then if she can provide a roadmap to you about how you can discover the films for yourself. Again, I am persevering from a concept that I want her to fail in this endeavor to show how truly obscure the movies that I'm showing are, and you really have to come to me if you want to see them, and that you are lost on your own, wandering through the darkness, bumping into walls. Gala?
Hey, Quentin. Hey, Roger. So everyone out there, Quentin did not stump me on Rage. You'll be happy to know.
No bumping into walls this time.
No, blindly walking through the dark, wondering, touching the walls, trying to feel for a tape.
Because normally, Gala, it's kind of like the store is closed and Quentin and I are inside and
partying with a pizza
after hours, and we used to, and we'd put a movie
Yes.
on, and every now and then a customer would come and like knock on the window, and like, no, we're closed. And they're like, yeah, but you're inside. I just need a quick tape.
And we give them we shoo them away hand expression.
And they're like standing at the window, like drooling, like looking at the tapes, like
Come back when we're
in.
open. Come back when we're open, Gala.
So this movie succeeded because it made me feel rage. Like I felt angry when watching this movie. First I watched it with my mom, and my mom's like, "What do you want to watch?" And I said, "Okay, let's watch Rage." And my mom was like,
She's like, okay.
okay. And then she's like, "This is his son gonna die?" I'm like, "Yeah, Mom, his son's gonna die." And she was like, "Ah!" So my mom was really frustrated. The thing I just thought about at the end of the movie was like, was justice served in any way? I mean, it's a revenge-o-matic, basically. He's enacting revenge. I love that he has nothing to lose, that he is a dead man already, so he's going to go on this warpath. But like, is his revenge served? Is justice served?
It's a subgenre of the revenge-o-matic genre because...
Can justice be served?
Yeah, because he's not the hero who's gone through all this, and now he's going to make righteous indignation and be a righteous avenger. The tragedies that have inflicted him have driven him crazy.
Yeah.
So he's not a righteous avenger. He's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's the effect of a crazy person. Like Farrah Fawcett in Extremities, where she's raped and she goes crazy when she gets the rapist, which we should do as a follow-up to our lipstick episode. Or Rod Steiger's Hennessy, where his family is killed by an accident like this with a British soldier, and now he's going to blow up the fucking Queen during the fucking Jubilee.
Yeah.
In an insane world, the sane man must appear to be insane.
Yeah, I just felt so upset during the movie. And then like the nurse is like, "Don't worry, your son's going to be fine. Our doctor's going to take good care of him." And I just started thinking, it's like now he's owned by the state, basically. Like they know he's going to die. They're not going to tell him. They're going to take his body later. They're going to experiment on it to find what this thing does to him. And I know they make it pretty clear, like, oh, this was an accident. But part of me was thinking, maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe they know, oh, there's only a few people that live around here. Let's take their bodies and see, because...
Spoken like a true Avery.
I know. Well, no, because in the scene where they're all in the war room...
I didn't buy all that shit. They knew those fucking guys were down there.
One of the guys says, "Oh,
Oops.
It's like
the valve's open. Oops."
Well, they say, "Oh, it's like well within human limit of like 50 parts per million." And the guy's like, "What are you talking about? 30's enough to kill him."
Yeah.
So it just like, it made me start thinking maybe they are doing this on purpose, and it made me angry.
Well, there comes a point when an accident has happened that people just jump on board.
Yeah.
Kubrick makes a good point of how that happens in Dr. Strangelove when the airplanes pass their fail-safe and everybody's discussing what to do. And the president says, get the premier on the phone. He's like, "Mr. President, am I to understand that you're going to call Premier Kissoff and tell him everything that we're going to do about to," and he's like, "Well, yes, I'm absolutely going to do that." And he's like, "Mr. President, if I may, we have a 20-minute jump on the Russians. And if we put everything else we've got into it, we stand a good chance of catching them with their pants down." And Kubrick's point is that guy's job in the room is to make that suggestion.
Right
to
on,
the president. And George C. Scott played that part in Dr. Strangelove. I feel like I've seen so many images of him and Kubrick playing chess together. And I can just imagine how much time they spent together, that I think a little gleam came off of Kubrick, a little shine kind of came onto George C. Scott a little. I mean, I'm sure George C. Scott also probably put a little bit onto Kubrick.
I would not be surprised if George C. Scott talked over with Kubrick the fact that he was making this movie and sent over a print to England, for Kubrick to watch when he was finished.
I got to tell you, as I was watching it, I was thinking about that.
I can see Kubrick liking this movie.
Oh, I know Kubrick would have liked this movie. I like this movie, and I use that as my indicator of whether Kubrick liked it or not. I will say that I noticed a number of reverse tracking shots, an effort to do a Kubrickian reverse tracking shot. They tended to always be kind of a little too wonky and like off to the side a little too much, and never really fully committing to a full reverse tracking shot. But I noticed that they were there, that there was a preponderance of them.
Yes, there was.
I agree with Quentin that the interweaving and editing transitions, although interesting, were wonky and bizarre, and sometimes confusing, actually, to figure out, especially at the first one where he spits the chew.
That was weird.
And it,
when he spits into camera and it kind of flies into almost 3D.
They're like coming at you. Yeah. Well, they all become fruit from the poison tree because of that first wonky one with the spit.
Yeah, with the spit. But you know what? The one that I actually thought worked was when his son's hand falls out of the car and then all of a sudden he's on the stretcher.
Actually, the one with the
yo-yo falling.
Yeah. Yo-yo falling.
I don't know if that worked, but all right. It made its point.
Michael Kahn tried.
It made its point.
Michael Kahn tried to make it work.
It was the one that worked the most.
Actually, I'm going to say...
yes. I will agree with that, as dubious as that claim is.
Now, I said that there were two. Actually, I hate to say it, but the spit was actually the other Cubist shot. Because he's in the foreground and he spits, and then we pan with the spit to the car that they're driving in.
Because it was just so disguised. Because not only
Which is weird. It's like, is he spitting at himself?
Not only is it disgusting you describing it, I'm seeing it so fucking clearly in my head.
It is really gross. I really liked that explosion at the end. It was the explosion that just kept on giving. Like,
they're still talking about that in Arizona or Texas or wherever they shot this movie.
Actually, I think they shot it in California.
Oh, really? Is it like Palmdale or something?
And by the way, one of the things that's really cool about this film is, after mentioning other moments that George C. Scott has done in his career, and then how he's touching base on this again, George C. Scott is killer at dying scenes. He's really good at dying scenes. This
movie doesn't hold back.
Yeah, it's like it's a movie with Richard Flesher that's a pretty good movie called The Last Run. But the reason to watch it is George C. Scott's dying scene. He's just got a killer dying scene. And then this, it's such a good performance that it, even though it's not the ending we want, it suffices.
And for him to make this directorial choice while acting in the movie says a lot, I think. It says a lot that he holds on Richard Basehart in that one shot, rather than cutting away. And it says a lot that he shows his own death rattle from a helicopter,
from the POV of a helicopter. He never
in dark.
He doesn't go in until the very, very end. But but most directors servicing an actor, servicing a star, and definitely most stars servicing themselves, are going to film that a little closer than the POV of a helicopter, when that's almost the most important part of his performance.
Yeah, and especially since you realize in that moment it's all futile.
Yeah.
He did what he had to do, which was to rage, which is the only state of being he could be in at that point. And he raged until its ultimate conclusion, which was not justice, because there is no justice. How can you have justice
for the loss of your child?
For the loss of your child. There is no justice. It's like, it's too terrible.
But he lets all those military officers know he was there, and that he was not to be checked off a list.
By the way, I have to say, I love Nicholas Bovey's performance as his son. For me, the movie was writing on
if you feel that or not. Do you feel that or not?
Do you feel it or not? And when he is in the hospital bed, writhing and moaning, and it's a really hard performance to do as a little kid. And he pulls it off to the point where I believe him.
You feel that he's George C. Scott's son, and that the two of them are father and son.
But you also feel him losing control of his bodily functions.
Which
you really feel he's
It was,
got
so,
hit
it was
with a fucking nerve gas, all right?
And I
it's
believe
killing him. Yeah.
And in the scenes where he's showing that he is dying of nerve gas, I 100% completely believe him. I think he does an amazing performance.
It was disturbing enough for Gretchen to walk out on the movie and go do laundry or something.
And then poor, you know,
like,
and the poor George C. Scott, that great scene where, you know, we actually sees the son's body pulling out of the morgue.
And he almost shows no expression. He because you don't need it at that point. First of all, he's George C. Scott.
He doesn't show the breakdown. The time cut that really works.
Oh, is the breakdown?
That's what's fantastic.
To him crying.
It cuts after he's left the place, and now he's just crying.
He's gone to some lonely
misery,
place to just release his misery.
Okay, that's the time cut that justifies all the other ones.
Yeah, and it's done just as a simple cut. It doesn't need any flourish.
Exactly.
Okay, so I have a review. So I've pulled a couple reviews for Rage. One is one of Joe Dante's film bulletin reviews.
I love Joe Dante's reviews.
Which, like he says, he's very embarrassed now because he had never directed a movie before and he can't believe how hard he is on the directors.
That's one of the reasons I love Joe Dante's reviews.
So, Rage. One of the more downbeat offerings of recent seasons, this Warner Brothers release manages to sustain a fairly consistent level of impassioned drama, thanks primarily to the powerful playing of star George C. Scott, who also directed. Though awkward and excessive at times, the basic thrust of Rage is so attuned to the moral outrage felt by concerned segments of the public that it carries an almost built-in righteous impact. Less thoughtful viewers will only find it depressing. The screenplay by Philip Friedman and Dan Kleinman is anything but subtle, but it preys knowingly on current social and political anxieties. When officials of various government agencies lie shamelessly to Scott, coldly deny their involvement to the public, and treat the victims of their actions as control subjects to be coldly analyzed in their death throes, we believe it. It's too close to the front pages not to be unnerving. Production is on the tacky side, and cinematically, Scott's direction is not exactly polished, but he has surrounded himself with a cast culled from previous Scott successes and coaxes nuances and inflections from the actors that are exactly right. Martin Sheen, Bernard Hughes, Kenneth Tobey, Robert Walden, Dabbs Greer, and others are chilling in clinically detached attitudes that make the emotions of the real people, Scott, Family Doctor Richard Basehart, Farmer John Diskaris, all the more affecting. Scott's handling of the climax is too overwrought to be convincing, and Fred Cohenkamp's mobile cinematography tends to wobble occasionally. But despite its flaws, Rage is one moral tract with a ring of truth.
That's a really well-written review. That's a very well... I love that.
No,
Joe Dante, I love his reviews.
Yeah, it's a very well-written review, and even his breakdown of the plot, which I didn't read, is well done. And I have another review for Rage from Shock Cinema, issue number 30. During the early 70s, a cloud of distrust hovered over the nation, where the government no longer looked upon as a protector, but as an entity with its own self-serving goals and motives. Rage was an early example of the military/secret science subgenre, and it was also a shocking film, though not for obvious reasons. Dan Logan, George C. Scott, who also directed the film, owns a ranch with livestock in rural America. He is a recent widower and is also raising his 12-year-old son, Chris, by himself. The two decide to camp out one day while checking on the sheep herd, and the next day, Dan awakens to find the boy in a coma-like state, shaking and bleeding from the nose. After rushing to the hospital, the Logans are treated by Dr. Holliford, Martin Sheen, a smooth-talking physician who assures Dan that everything is fine, though Dan wonders why his own doctor, Richard Basehart, was taken off the case in the first place. By this point, the military has moved in, and a group of officers and medical advisors begin to conference about the situation, including Bernard Hughes, Paul Stevens, Stephen Young, and Robert Walden. It is discovered that a bioagent was accidentally dropped on civilian land, and there's no chance of survival for any victims. A cover-up plan is quickly put into motion. Not one iota of remorse about the casualties is displayed, and Chris does indeed die a very painful death. Doubting these physicians, Dan escapes from his quarantine under the lazy eye of guard Ed Lauder and soon makes a trip to the local arms dealer. It is at this point where events take a most unexpected turn, as Dan loads up with weapons and a military police manhunt ensues. At this precise moment, your cinematic rule book, quote unquote, is tossed aside. Destruction takes place and bodies pile up. But they aren't the brass targets or Dr. Frankenstein's. Instead, the chalk lines are drawn around guards and patrol officers. These scenes pack an emotional wallop because instead of Buford poster-style heroics, we see policemen and soldiers who don't even know the truth themselves being shot down. And instead of a prime slice of 70s revenge, we're served a character study of a man who goes beyond the point of rational thought process. He does indeed manage to take out the biolab, but the real culprits are never even close to being in harm's way. The viewer has felt comfortable knowing where Dan's dark journey was heading. The viewer, it turns out, is wrong. Rage was only one of 3 projects that Scott directed, and that's a true shame because he possesses a unique vision behind the lens. All the performers are top drawer, but Sheen and Walden are in career best mode. Sheen is polite and displays no outward signs of wrongdoing, yet somehow conveys the true sense of malady, while Walden is only on screen for a few short minutes, but is truly chilling. Rage dares to explore the ripple effect of retribution, and one does not get to enjoy the ride. A harrowing experience, Rage does belong on the shelf next to Walking Tall and The Parallax View, but also belongs to a genre unto itself. A film with this much star power, backed by a major studio, Warner Brothers, and telling a tale such as this would be almost unheard of today.
You know what? That's a really good review. Because I was like a little put off, like I didn't get to see him get the guys. I didn't get to see him and the people he killed. It was just these innocent cops, like the poor cops who show up and, God, he had rage, but that rage was so misdirected. But I think that's the point of Rage, is that it is misdirected. And that's part of Scott's, thesis statement that he's making, the big takeaway, the futility of even Rage. That really he never even gets close.
So, Gala, tell us about how we can get Rage.
Well, I watched mine on Amazon renting, but I managed to pick up a Warner Home Video box. I actually bought it in a lot for $10 with Exorcist 3.
Oh, wow.
I love Exorcist 3, so I'm really excited that I have both George C. Scott. Not obviously, Exorcist 3 is not directed by George C. Scott.
But so the George C. Scott double feature.
Exactly.
Well, so $5 each?
Yeah, $5 each. Actually, and I think it was previously owned by another video store because a sticker is on the front that reads that it should go in the action adventure section.
Well, I would agree with that. Okay, if you broke down drama to action adventure, I guess I'd go for that.
So yeah,
a form of action and a kind of adventure.
Oh, revenge matters. Even twisted ones like this.
Yeah.
What in God's name is happening here?
The loved one.
Tony Richardson's first film since his Academy Award-winning Tom Jones, The Loved One.
The loved one. A motion picture with something to offend everyone.
Shocking.
The Loved One, with co-hit Cry For Me Billy, plays December 26th and 27th at the New Beverly Cinema. 7165 Beverly Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90036. For more information, visit thenewbev.com. The New Beverly Cinema, always on film.
And now up is our second feature, Tony Richardson's The Loved One. I've been dragging my feet when it comes to watching this movie for
your entire life.
My entire life. Roger really loves it, and I've heard other people love it, but also one of the things that made it really kind of touching for me to sit down and finally watch it, the guy who more or less set me on this road of movie buffdom was my stepfather, Kurt Zastavil. And Kurt brought up The Loved One quite a bit over the course of the years that I was with him. And in fact, I'm positive now because we were talking about this. The Loved One is the last Kurt movie I had never seen. I've seen all the other ones that he made a point of talking about and exalting the virtues of, and The Loved One is the only one that I haven't seen. Something about it held me off from seeing it, but also, I guess part of the reason I never got around to seeing it is I liked Kurt's version of it.
His description.
I suspect I might have even liked it more than the actual movie, so I've kind of held it kind of precious, but it was time for me to see it, and Roger loves the film, and so here we are now. And we finally watched the loved one. I will read the back of the box, and then I will hand the discussion to Roger, and then I will join in. Okay?
All righty. Loved one, 1965.
Okay, so this is an MGMUA box, unfortunately the smaller kind, not the cool, larger kind, square kind that we like. It would be from the classic section under the L's. Billed as the motion picture with something to offend everybody, The Loved One gloriously and outrageously fulfills its promise. Absolutely nothing is sacred in this blistering black comedy on the Southern California way of life. ... And death. A simple vacation visit evolves into a wildly chaotic roller coaster ride through Los Angeles for a young English poet, Robert Morris, from How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. Based on Evelyn Waugh's classic novella, actually, the satire slings its venom-tipped arrows at such targets as the mortuary business, both human and pet variety, religious cults, the military, Hollywood, British expatriates, and the space race. The star-studded cast features Rod Steiger as Mr. Joyboy, Jonathan Winters in a dual role, John Gielgud, and a 13-year-old Paul Williams. I've heard he was actually 25 when he did it. He just looked 13.
Yeah.
Plus cameos by Milton Berle, Tab Hunter, James Coburn, Roddy McDowall, Robert Morley, and Liberace, who is especially great. But perhaps most unforgettable, I disagree with this, even though, well, I don't know about the unforgettable part, but perhaps the most unforgettable and disgusting is Aileen Gibbons as Steiger's whale-like mother who gorges herself while watching TV.
Wow, they actually credited her on the box.
Approximate running time, 2 hours and 2 minutes. And the tape number of this Video Archives tape is 7554. Roger, tell us about your appreciation of The Loved One and why you wanted to watch it.
The thing about this movie is it comes a year after Dr. Strangelove. Mm-hmm. And it's obviously an answer to Dr. Strangelove. I brought with me my Laserdisc of the...
what does the cover look like?
Of the film. Mm-hmm. This signed by Paul Williams. I had him sign my disc. It's great. The comedy with something to offend everyone is also on the cover of this. And I noticed, and I hadn't noticed it for years, Paul Williams was in my film, The Rules of Attraction. Mm-hmm. And so, of course, I was so excited to work with him. And Paul's such a nice guy. And I brought my Laserdisc for him to sign. And he signed it. And I hadn't really looked at it since then. And I never really thought much about what he wrote. But then, we watched the movie together and I was thinking about it and I pulled out my disc to look at it. And I noticed that what he had written was, Roger, it's not a rocket. Love, Paul Williams. Well, as you know, Dr. Strangelove, it's a dark comedy. Mm-hmm. It's a movie about essentially sex. It's a movie about sex. All the subtext in Dr. Strangelove is sex oriented. And it wasn't really until Paul Williams, I looked at this that Paul Williams had written on here, it's not a rocket. This is also same thing. Mm-hmm. It's about sex. Mm-hmm. It's about putting, let me see, what did I write here? If the rocket is a penis and we're putting stiffs into orbit or endeavoring to, then this movie really is a direct response to Dr. Strangelove. There is a kind of chaotic quality to the approach that speaks to me. Mm-hmm. What Tony Richardson is trying to do, really throughout his career, but mostly in this film, which was coming right on the heels of an Academy Award-winning film.
No, it's
a huge hit he had right before this.
Yeah, it's his I can do anything I want after this big success
and
movie.
This is exactly what you're supposed to do. A black and white, Evelyn Waugh, social satire based on, Hollywood and the mortuary industry.
No, I would buy that.
That you take that power and you wield it in the way that, you should. And it's
even with an all-star cast.
You gather together an all-star cast and you make a movie that is out to literally offend. And while this movie may not seem so offensive now in its kind of wild, over-the-top, outrageous comedy in it, Haskell Wexler, who also was the DP and also produced the movie, has said, the movie may not any longer be in its social context. And so it might be different. And he kind of longed for more movies to push the boundaries of what was socially acceptable. And at the time...
I think his comment is right on the money, actually.
Yeah. And with this film, that was what they were trying to do. And while it may not read the same way to a modern audience, I can tell you that for me, when I was first exposed to this movie, sometime around 1988 or so, it introduced me to a kind of filmmaking style that was comedic, but also dark. And I have a dark sense of humor and a kind of filmmaking approach that just sang to me. This kind of jumping out of scenes, and Hal Ashby, who edited the film, did a lot of like lapping of dialogue. So we're overhearing the previous scene and the next scene. And so it has this kind of editorial quality that I actually think it has had a large effect on how I approach movies and also even the structure of films. When I look at the Rules of Attraction now, which is such a every scene is seemingly disconnected from the scenes that follow. And
well, now that you actually pointing it out like that, no, there is kind of a Tony Richardson quality to that movie that you made. And I don't just mean based on The Loved One, based on a lot of his movies.
I always thought it was just The Prisoner that influenced me, that kind of editorial style and the cynicism and the kind of carnival-like view of the world. I always thought that was the real influence, but it turns out, it's Peter Medak and with The Ruling Class. It's Tony Richardson with this film. It's
Lindsay Anderson.
Absolutely Lindsay Anderson, especially with If and even Britannia Hospital.
And
Oh Lucky Man. Oh Lucky Man. The whole trilogy. The Lucky Man trilogy. It's kind of a trilogy.
No, it absolutely is a trilogy. It's just nice to hear offhandedly the Oh Lucky Man trilogy referred to.
And, in preparing for this, I started looking up Richardson and hearing what people had to say about him, what Anjanette Comer had to say about him, what John Calley, who was the studio head, behind it, had to say at the time.
Who credited as producer along with Haskell Weissler.
And almost down the line, everybody said he's crazy. He's crazy. That's the guy to do this movie because he's crazy. And I can't tell you how many times in my life I've heard people tell me I'm crazy, that I have a kind of crazy approach to filmmaking, that what I'm looking for from actors is not often what's on the page. It's what they're bringing on the day, in the moment. And that in the moment, we make these discoveries that are surprising.
Well, Roger, I got to say, look, I'll go into this in a second. I didn't really care for the movie that much. However, the way you're describing it, it's making me realize there is a genuine connection between this movie in particular and Rules of Attraction.
For sure. Completely. And I never realized it more than when we watched it together.
Yeah, it's I mean, I don't know if I don't know why. I don't know if I actually plugged it in while we were watching the movie, because I was actually kind of dealing a lot with the movie. The movie's a lot to deal with.
There's a hell of a lot going on.
The movie's a lot to deal with, but then just thinking about Tony Richardson's career in toto.
Yeah.
And then hearing you talk, I'm really realizing that, especially when it comes to this movie and Rules of Attraction, there is a connection, but also just even a connection of, which is almost even more important, methodology. Like, for instance, I can see Tony...
That's exactly what it is.
I can see Tony Richardson loving the idea of the Kip Pardue going to Europe and doing that entire thing.
We don't know what will happen.
Tony Richardson would think that's a great fucking idea. That would be the reason to fucking do the movie, as far as Tony Richardson is concerned. It's kind of the reason you fucking wanted to do the movie.
Exactly. And we are very similar, I've realized, as filmmakers and probably as men, that we're seeking to capture a kind of chaos. One of the things he said while watching the movie, and part of it was because of the print and the what the film looked like, but I think you said it looked like the Monkees.
Well, no, it evolved into the Monkees. Okay, at first I'm watching the film after hearing about it forever. I think on the back of the box, my jumping off point on the film is billed as the motion picture with something to offend everybody. The movie doesn't have almost anything to offend anybody now anymore. This is not a bad thing. I'm not saying this as a bad thing, but this is a piece of outrageous, scabrous entertainment done at a time, but that time has passed.
Yeah.
And so it's not outrageous anymore, and it's not as venom dripped anymore as it used to be. In fact, it's almost even hard to see the venom. And frankly, I see everybody having a good time. Is what I see going on.
In 1965, to eviscerate the space race and the military involved in the space race is a kind of like, he's calling everybody out.
I'm not saying that then it wasn't that, but frankly, more than anything we've watched since we've been doing this series, but I would even go so far as to say more than anything I've seen in the last 2 years, and I'm talking about watching movies from the 30s and watching silent movies or whatever, The Loved One is so drastically a movie of its time.
Yeah.
You almost have to project yourself into that time to even kind of get it. when we were watching the movie, I'm not connected with it. I'm enjoying it well enough. You're watching it with me. You're hearing me laugh. Mm-hmm. But most of those laughs are, oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Laughs, as opposed to actually it tickling my funny bone and provoking
that's meant to be funny.
Yeah, I'm not saying that didn't happen a few times, but it didn't happen that often, and mostly it was a whole lot of, oh, that's kind of funny. Mm-hmm. Oh, hey, that's clever. Oh, that's neat. It's a comment on it. And then I think made my first real comment on the movie about 50 minutes into it. I go, I feel like I'm watching a black and white Batman episode. And that was so fucking right on to the type of humor that's going on. I mean, the script is written by Terry Southern and Christopher Esherwood, and
Terry Southern who wrote
Dr. Strangelove, and Christopher Esherwood who wrote
who's
Frankenstein: The True Story, one of my favorite TV movies of all time. All right,
still the best Frankenstein.
Yeah, absolutely. But Lorenzo Simple could have just as well be, working on this script. It has that same kind of thing. Not only that, you have Batman actors popping up in the thing. You have
people who would be doing guest stars and playing villains. On Batman.
Well, you do that. Okay, Milton Berle played a bad guy on Batman.
Milton Berle is in everything of this period.
Liberace played a bad guy on Batman.
You're right.
Alfred the Butler has got a small part.
That's right.
In the film, and
he plays one of the English.
And Rod Steiger as Joy Boy is basically playing Victor Buono as a Batman villain in this movie. Okay, but when I say Batman, that's not me being facetious. That's just picking up on this satirical pop culture kind of comedy that Batman didn't start, but definitely was one of the more popular versions. Mm-hmm. Then it stopped being Batman, which by comparison actually has a through line, and then it turned into a Monkeys episode. When it becomes that they're all at that room or whatever, it's like, well, this is just a fucking Monkeys episode.
When they're all in the I don't know what they call it, a waiting room.
Oh yeah, when they bring everybody, all the cast members together, pretty much.
All the military guys come into the room, and there's a bunch of coffins, and they start opening them.
Oh yeah,
up.
that was okay. And
there's women inside them, and they're like, "All right, baby, rockets away," or something like that. The guy jumps in the coffin.
That was the Monkeys episode. However, if they all started fighting each other and they cut to pows and zooms and gonks, all right, then it would be a Batman episode.
Okay, so I thought about that, what you said, and the Monkeys thing also. Mm-hmm. And, for a long while, I used to watch the Monkeys to learn about cinema. There was...
Bob Rafelson did direct it.
Exactly.
I will go so far as to say that Bob Rafelson's direction of Head is one of the best directed movies in 1969.
For sure. Yeah, actually, I'll go with you on that. Great cinema is usually created out of necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention. And so for the Monkeys, you've got like one day to shoot 20 scenes or something. Mm-hmm. And you've got the Monkeys and you've got a room full of people and there's a bunch of action going on. How are you going to cover it? We don't have time to do master single. Mm-hmm. All we have time for is master. It's like, that's what we got. And so frequently on the Monkeys, they would shoot a master shot, a wide shot, let chaos ensue, and then punch in using pan and scan. Mm-hmm. And then they would literally be digitally scanning and creating shots within one single shot, a master shot. So that's just, being efficient. But when I watch those things and that kind of strange panning, scanning, digital tracking that they do, it's fascinating to me. To me, that's cinema when I watch it. Now, The Loved One, if it bears any kind of similarity to television of that time period, it's partly because when you shoot comedy, when you're shooting, Jim Carrey, you know what you've got scripted, but you don't know what he's going to do. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be the dickhead who's too close, that you miss it, or that you try to push your cinema on Jim Carrey and not capture his spontaneous moment. Mm-hmm. No, the best thing you can do to service the film is to step back and capture the action. And so a lot of this movie is shot in these kind of long, wide takes, these wide takes. And part of the reason he's doing that is because Richardson is looking for spontaneity. He was constantly asking Morse, like, what can you do? What would you do? What would you do that would be weird here? Well, I would kiss the tit of the statue. Mm-hmm. Okay, then do that. That's exactly what Roger Avery would do. Mm-hmm. Roger Avery would say, hey, why don't you spit on that other actor and see what happens? Then you go to the other actor and say, hey, don't let him do anything to you. You push him back. If he comes on you, and you manipulate people to make it as real as possible. I feel Richardson doing that in this, especially when I look at the editing style in The Loved One, which I was always really enamored with.
The editing style, where I had an ultimate problem with it as a movie is in the first half, it was what it was, and it was enjoyable enough. I wasn't ever caught up into it, but it was enjoyable enough as this comedy relic of this time and of this sensibility. It's the sensibility that's of its time more than anything else.
Yeah.
And my problem with the film as a movie is in the last half an hour when it switches over mostly to the Anjanette Comer character. And then the film starts taking her seriously and starts taking itself seriously. And I don't take her seriously, and I vaguely resent the movie trying to get sincere.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, I agree. I think we talked about it a little bit that that Richardson, and specifically probably at a certain point in the film, or maybe it's Hal Ashby realizes at a certain point in the film, we haven't really earned that with her. And they try to squeeze it all in what feels like 5 consecutive scenes or sequences where they quickly jam in.
Well, it's the only time
quality.
It's the only time the movie has any true coherence, because it actually is telling her story, but I don't care about her story.
Yeah. The only thing that's necessary to tell in her story is that she's become disillusioned by everything in the world.
That's true, but then the movie hurts itself by ignoring Robert Morris for that long, concentrating on her, but also equally concentrating on Jonathan Winters. I think Jonathan Winters is a whole smack dab in the center of this movie. Look, for the dads of Gen Xers, Jonathan Winters was considered the funniest guy on the planet. He was like your dad's favorite hippest comedian. Maybe somebody like George Carlin, maybe somebody like Flip Wilson, but for the most part, Jonathan Winters was your dad's genius. Was your dad's comedy genius. And I bought that for a long, long period of time. And I don't buy it anymore. I still like him in It's a Mad, Mad World. And if he's sitting there with Merv Griffin and just taking items, taking the coffee cup, taking a pencil, taking a comb, and then riffing, improvising 6 different things that comb could be, there's nobody better than him. But I don't think he's that good of an actor. And this shows the limits to how not a good actor he is. And the fact that he's trying to replace Peter Sellers, who I have my own issues about being overrated. All right. But nevertheless, having said that, you can't even hold a flickering birthday candle compared to what Peter Sellers does in Dr. Strangelove and what Jonathan Winters does in this. He's just not only is he not able to pull off the double role, it's a true comedian pulling it up. There's just nothing there. There's no character there. Where by comparison, Rod Steiger is playing a ridiculous character, but he's a self-serious actor, and he's a real human being.
Well, it's interesting. Rod Steiger shows up just after the death of John Gielgud, which is just in time.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
John Gielgud is so magnificent.
No, John
in the
Gielgud,
movie. He's the heart and soul of this film.
The heart the movie has, John Gielgud takes with him when he exits the picture.
That shot of him leaving the studio, where we don't even see what he's looking at when he looks back at the studio, but just him walking out and the melancholic music that's playing and his look back.
And the back and forth with the stupid fucking secretary.
Oh, yeah. That whole... I'm told that you've been here 31 years. I hope I'm not here that long.
I'm sure that's a fate that will not befall you.
Yeah. He has such poetic lines in this. There's a line that I love that he delivers to Robert Morris when he's talking about the good old days. Ah, yes, the swimming pool. It was like a great aquarium flashing with the limbs of beauties. All, alas, long since departed. Golden lads and girls, all must as chimney sweepers come to dust. That is such a beautiful line.
It's a great
And
line.
I'll tell you something. I haven't been able to understand that line until I sat down and started like what the hell is he saying there? I've never understood what he said because It's so lyrically spoken. And then Robert Morse's character, like, because he's a poet, you can see his like appreciation that his uncle just exudes poetry constantly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wisdom and a lot of criticism, a lot of really smart criticism going on, exuding.
Well, it would appear the John Gielgud character is the Evelyn Waugh's mouthpiece.
He's Evelyn Waugh, basically.
Yeah.
And when he dies, when he passes away, and we are now in the world of Joy Boy, of Dr. Joy Boy. Thank God Rod Steiger is there to pick up.
Yes.
Because he does. He takes the ball and he runs with it. And I think you asked me why I love this movie. It's Rod Steiger. That's actually why I love this movie. It's Rod Steiger. It's Mr. Joy Boy and the revelation that you don't know anybody until you've been to their home. Joy Boy has some of the most amazing moments. And when we go home to his house and we meet Mom.
Okay. Do you like that part?
Yes. To me, she's
fucking disgusting.
That's one of the reasons I love it.
Made me want to fucking gag.
When she's trying to pull the turkey.
Edith Massey eating fucking eggs is less disgusting than this fucking woman.
Eileen Gibbons.
Yeah.
Eileen Gibbons credited on the box. That's how powerful her performance is.
I mean, what's remarkable
when he's trying to pull the turkey out of her hands to help her.
Oh my God, that's making me fucking vomit in my mouth.
I need my little Gandhi bird. I call him Gandhi because he's so skinny.
I just love that.
I mean, what's crazy is how I did not realize that there was this forerunner to John Waters just sitting there in 60s cinema, just waiting to be discovered.
John Waters discovered it.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Apparently. But nevertheless. And also there's there's a comedy to Edith Massey's kook that's not there. Joy Boy's mother. Joy Boy has it.
Well, Joy Boy definitely has it. And we talked about this and I showed it to you because the videotape still has the reel changes.
Yeah.
Because it's clearly a print. There's a real change in this movie. I mean, in the old days, people may not even realize this now, since nowadays it feels like you just deliver everything on one MPV file.
What's a reel, Uncle Roger?
Yeah, movies used to come in reels of about 10, or sometimes 12. Twice as hard, 12 reels if you had a really big movie. And during the movie, you would do a reel change. And if you're curious about it, I suppose you can watch Fight Club and Brad Pitt explains what a reel change is. They have cigarette burn marks to show I don't think it's really done by a cigarette, but maybe in the old days. But the idea is that when the projectionist sees the blip, the projectionist changes the reels. Okay, so this has always been for editors a dilemma, because basically what you're doing is you're leaving the editing up to the projectionist.
Yeah. You never want a real change to happen like an exact cut has to happen. You always want a bit of overflow in there, so it doesn't matter.
It's like a sloppy cut or a hard cut or an indistinct cut by a couple of frames, right? Because you're leaving it really up to somebody else. Mostly, people are trying to just mitigate
the damage that a projectionist can cause
to make the flow good. But this movie was edited by Hal Ashby, who's one of the greatest editors of all time, and one of my favorite directors as well. And so there's a moment in the film at the Joy Boy house where Mr. Joy Boy Rod Steiger is making dinner and he's talking to Anjanette Comer, who's come over, and she is just...
What's her name again? Miss
Dinatogenous.
Yeah,
Miss Dinatogenous. She's come over because she's in love with him as an artist at work, and she's come over because he's romantically interested in
but she's considering it now.
She's not considering it, but then she shows up at his house and she sees who he really is, and what his life really is. More importantly, that he's got Big Mom who he's got to take care of, and he's got this weird perverse life that she didn't know about. And so he's in there and he's telling her about this dream that he has. Oh, and I go down to the big supermarket on La Brea and, I buy lobsters by the dozen the way other people buy eggs and, for Mom. And I show up and everybody at the supermarket sees me coming. They say, Daddy's little Joy Boy loves lobster. Mom's little Joy Boy loves lobster tonight, or something like that. Everybody's all happy. And then the dream changes. The dream turns into a nightmare. And he begins describing how the dream is a nightmare. And what Hal Ashby does is he takes the dream part where he's telling the fantastic part of the dream, and then right as the dream changes, the real change comes. So we have this disjarring cut, this emotionally jarring cut. And after that cut,
as the story changes.
And after that cut, he literally says, and then the dream changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then he describes a nightmare that comes after that of the lobsters.
That was
eating mom.
I wouldn't have even, I wouldn't have noticed that, but you pointed it out and that was really great.
I think that is one of the most important moments in cinema. And I think it's a thing of beauty to watch. Before
we wrap this up and go to a break and bring Gala in, one of the things that was actually kind of funny to me is, look, there's always these really funny moments. I'm not laughing from my heart. I'm laughing from my head. But I really enjoyed the Liberace section.
The Liberace section is
I thought
incredible.
He was terrific. I thought the Tab Hunter spiel that he's giving as the tour guide, and just having the fact that Tab Hunter doing it was really cool. And the only era that I like Milton Berle is this era, because it seems like 2 years after It's a Mad, Mad World, and he could almost be playing the same fucking guy.
He almost play. It's like the character from Mad Men, Mad World.
Yeah, he's almost played the same guy, just being married to somebody else. And then I actually do like the astronaut's wife, Barbara Nichols. I actually thought that scene was kind of sexy.
Yeah. I love it when he says, will you be able to? She's like, oh, I know how to play that scene. Yeah. Like she's got to dress. She's a stripper, and she's got to go be in front of all the astronauts and everything. He's like, oh, I know how to play that scene.
I've heard actually that Jane Mansfield actually did a cameo for The Loved One, and it got cut out.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll bet there was a lot that they cut out of the movie, a lot of cameos and a lot of extra stuff. Like when you're making a movie that's collected chaos, that happens. There's my least favorite moment in Dr. Strangelove is the Coke machine gag.
Oh yeah,
where Bat Guano shoots the Coke machine. It's when he says you're gonna have to deal with the Coca-Cola company, and then he shoots the Coke machine and he looks down at it and it sprays in his face.
It's a conventional comedy gag that somehow got into that.
It's way
above time movie.
Like it is way beneath Kubrick's level of comedy, and he's trying to do normal. Like I'll do normal comedy the way a normal human being would do it.
Yeah.
And he tries, and Kubrick's just not that kind of a comedian. He's a different kind. He works at a much higher level.
Pauline Kael talks about that in Phantom of the Paradise when Beef slips on his shoes and can't get up again, and you have Jessica Harper laughing. She goes, okay, De Palma is such a director, he can't even film those scenes.
Yeah.
All right. Now, it's not like any directors like filming those scenes ever.
Yeah.
But they're at least capable of doing it.
Well, there's a lot of those scenes in The Loved One that I think are just not that funny. Like a lot of the stuff that I think is intended to be, ha-ha funny gags, I frankly don't find that funny. What I find funny is the awkwardness and the uncomfortable parts, the more elevated humor,
frankly,
I think is genius. Whereas the other stuff, I feel like it's playing for what a general audience might expect when they come to see a yuck comedy.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to deliver that for that component of the audience.
The movie cannot be separated from its time. When you watch it, it is a product of its time, and you need to kind of go back to that sensibility if you're going to get anything out of it.
Yeah. And we're back.
Hey, Quentin. Hey, Roger. Okay, so...
Hi, Gallo.
Hi. The very first time I ever saw this movie, I was probably 15 or 16, and I had to turn it off because I actually literally could not physically understand what they were saying.
Almost the entire movie is dubbed, by the way. And I should mention, I always thought Robert Morse, because of The Loved One, was British.
Oh, God, no. It's a terrible British accent.
I thought he was, it is a terrible British accent, but I always thought he was British, and that everything else he had done, he was doing American accents.
Yeah. So you thought he was just a terrible actor playing himself, but then he became great, all right, in the Boatniks.
And I actually think, if I were to remake this movie today, I would want to cast Edgar Wright to play him.
He kind of resembles an Edgar Wright character.
He has there's an Edgar Wright.
There is an Edgar Wright. There is an Edgar Wright quality.
I would love to put Edgar in this movie.
Yeah, he actually looped all of his dialogue.
Yeah,
he talks about looping everything because he came and he apparently did not have the accent down at all. So he just said it however he wanted to say
Which is weird to make the movie about Britons in coming to Hollywood, and you cast an American.
Yeah, with all these Brits. Forget about the fact that the 60s is a time where every young actor was a British actor. There's they're coming out of their pockets.
So I watched the movie and I had to turn it off because I couldn't. I was telling my dad the entire time, "What are they saying?" I was complaining.
Yeah, you were. I
was, like,
vividly
writhing
remember
in
the
my
moment
seat.
because this is a movie that's very precious to me, and I'm like, been waiting her whole life, and I'm like, okay, finally she's old enough that I can show her The Loved One, and I put it on, and it's like the British club scene where they're all talking. And he's like, and it's like the dialogue is both looped and it's kind of wonky British.
Yeah. Well, no, she's like, and also she's like 50 years old, and you're dying a movie where the jumping off point of creativity is Batman, the monkeys, and laughing.
And Dr. Strangelove.
And Dr. Strangelove. On the high end. Yeah.
Well, I rewatched the movie. And I actually have a review from your new favorite film critic, me at 17.
Oh, okay.
When I thought I knew everything. So this is an excerpt from June 14th, 2013, upon my second viewing. It's about something kooky. Who makes a modern movie in black and white? A man who's told he can make whatever he wants. A man who is told that he is allowed to do his passions just this once. He seized the opportunity and then was locked up forever.
I don't think he was locked up forever. I think he went off and did another movie right after. That pissed everybody off right after.
Even more than The Loved One.
This was the beginning of his pissing everyone off. Yeah.
A black and white movie about the funeral business. Of course, interwoven with the Hollywood scene is strange. It shows that Hollywood is death. At least it showed me that. Like, I don't know what I was on at 17.
And that's an excerpt? There's an unexpurged version?
There's a darker version that we're not allowed to discuss.
Entire essay. I don't know what I was on at 17, but anyway, I rewatched the movie again.
Angst is what you were on.
And
Teen
thinking
angst.
I knew how to read a film. Hopefully now I kind of know better, but upon this viewing as an older person now than I was at 17, I liked it even more, to be honest. I think the transitions are amazing. Hal Ashby as an editor is so good. And there's so many good performances in this, especially now that I've been exposed to Rod Steiger and can appreciate Rod Steiger. Liberace is amazing.
Liberace's terrific.
The Liberace sequence is so funny, and at first I didn't realize it was Liberace, and then I realized it's Liberace, and I was like, oh my God, it's so good.
You have to say
to me, Liberace is the only comic turn that comes in there that actually works the way a comic turn is supposed to work.
You're right. And part of that is playing on our expectations of Liberace and Undertaker.
Well, I do think that there is an aspect that you're actually hearing Liberace's real voice.
His non-affectation.
If he didn't have that, this would be his voice.
Yeah. Okay, and Roger told me I have to say it. Okay, Behind the Candelabra is my favorite Soderbergh movie.
But only because you don't like Soderbergh
only because
films.
I don't like Soderbergh films. But I love Behind the Candelabra.
I like Behind the Candelabra too.
I love
I'm
that
actually
movie.
not a fan of Behind the Candelabra.
I love it so much. I've seen it like 3 times. I don't like Soderbergh, but I love Behind the Candelabra.
But I love how brave Michael Douglas is.
He's terrific in it.
He's terrific in the movie.
They're both terrific, and they're both brave.
Yeah. Really good.
Actually, they are.
And I love Roddy McDowall.
I love Roddy
He's
McDowall.
so funny. Just every performance is great.
Yeah, Quentin, you actually mentioned you think he's playing Daryl Zanuck, right?
I do. I think
you're absolutely right.
He might very well be playing Daryl Zanuck.
I think you're absolutely. It completely makes sense because he has a father who's.
You're like, hey,
hey, DJ, DJ. And everybody's like laughing, like it's all going well. And then, oh, DJ. And then suddenly the call turns.
Yeah, right.
Everybody vacates the room.
I actually think, even though it's obvious, I think the only sight gag, except for the elephant, the only sight gag that I thought really completely worked was the masseuse with the scout machine, all right, going over Roddy McDowall's head while he's having a meeting.
Yeah.
That was something out of Mike Figgis.
I mean, that he's like sucking in oxygen from a tank, like in between things. I mean, that's predating a lot of the kind of 70s and 80s ideas of studio heads. It's always been that way.
And I love Paul Williams. He's actually 23 when they filmed the film. He said that he came in and they started doing him for his wardrobe, and he had to keep his voice high because he had to pretend that he was 13, but really he's 23. And then in the DVD special feature interview, he said, "Oh, but my voice was high. That was before all the years of drinking gin."
That was before the years of gin.
It was just really funny. Lionel Stander playing Hum, or the guy that writes for Hum, I thought he was funny. I think that whole gag of like the guru not being the guru really works for me. I even like Jonathan Winters playing 2 people. I don't think he really differentiates them very much from each other. I know they're supposed to be brothers.
The truth is, Jonathan Winters is kind of one of the more least interesting characters of the movie. Both of them. The Blessed Reverend is very simple, a character. You know, his desperate schlub brother,
car salesman like
brother is the more interesting version of Jonathan Winters.
Yeah.
You know, and feels more realistic, and he handles it better, but it's still
not that interesting.
That interesting when you put him alongside, you know, John Gielgud. I love all the minor performances in this film. I mean, they come in and it's just one after another delicious. And you mentioned that elephant gag, which was absolutely the best visual gag in the movie, where they're playing with what is reality and what isn't reality by, you know, they'll cut to a bunch of prisoners running and then they're running to get on a bus.
And shout out to John Gielgud, who is one of the only actors to have ever won an Oscar, Emmy, Grammy, and a Tony. So
the EGOT.
Yeah, he's got them all.
He just is missing that small prize called the Pulitzer. Sorry, that was my bad. Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That was good.
Trebek.
Yeah. I've found the cure to the plague of the 20th century, and now I've lost it.
I have so many favorite moments of this movie, but I'll keep it to 2 because I love it.
Narrow it.
Okay.
You should keep it to 3 because 3 is what Tesla
I'll keep it to 3.
You to.
Thank you for giving me an extra one. The first one is that sex scene romp in the garden. We actually rewatched it today, and I made you pause, and I said, "Oh, this is my favorite part." And he was like, This is your favorit part?"
Yeah, I was like, this is your favorite part of the entire movie? The entire movie, which is almost 2 hours long, this is your favorite part?
And I love it because it's him and Amy are sitting, and like he's trying to make a pass at her and finally have sex with her or make out with her. And he's like, "You're an American girl and I'm a man." And it's just, I don't know. And then he says, "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" And her face goes, "Did you just write that?" And she just,
her delivery of that line,
I can't do it justice.
where she kind of screeches like a bird constantly whenever she speaks. That moment is probably the character development for her because like all she cares about is whispering glades. But when she hears poetry, she's so gullible that she's like, "Did you write that?" Everything being false in her world. Nobody's written anything.
Yeah.
The hum guy.
Yeah, the hum
Lionel
guy's
Stander,
false. Yeah.
He's false.
And Joy Boy's false.
Can we just talk just briefly, because I forgot it earlier. I just have to mention that Rod Steiger, he's such, he's so in it in the scene. There's a scene when he says to Amy Dinotogenous, I just want to show you my room. I'm not sure why. I just thought I felt I had to.
No, I love that moment.
And he shows it to her. And then he's showing her the room. And then he kind of goes and he picks up some dumbbells and he puts them away. We don't even see them. He just kind of does it. It's like a little something. Steiger is constantly finding little business that is supernaturalistic. And it just shows his command.
I love the condemned house sequence. When she's swinging over the condemned house.
That's the best scene in the movie.
Yeah.
The whole setup of that scene was great. Then the scene depiction was fantastic, and her on that swing was amazing. When the movie wasn't able to follow up that scene with something else equally compelling, that really showed me, this is a very hit and miss movie.
Well, it's funny because Anjanette Comer was an unknown. Tony Richardson could have cast almost anybody, apparently. Everybody wanted to do the movie, and he chose her. And one of the reasons is because she had a kind of unpredictable quality about her. She was spontaneous in a way that he was looking for in this film in particular. And she mentions, like, I loved going on that swing. I loved doing that. And knowing that he's the kind of guy who's like, in the moment, what can you do? Where are we? Let's swing off of this building. That's her really doing it.
And then I know you guys were a little lukewarm at the end, but okay, so first off, her name is Thanatogenous. And thanatology is the study of death, but not in like the literal sense of death and dying, but in the idea of death and dying. So it's like, because her whole thing is that she's just in love with the idea,
the concept of death.
Of it, not really. And
every woman that works at Whispering Glades appears to be a goth girl.
Well, that's
a 50s goth girl.
That's Zoe Tamarellis' name in Miss 45 is Thana.
Yeah. But I actually really love the moment where she like kind of decides to die, and she goes and she paints her own face, paints her own death visage.
I did not like that whole last 20 minutes with her, except for her suicide.
Yeah, suicide.
I was like talking shit and I was like being like grumbly.
Yeah.
And then let me shut up for a second.
Yeah, you actually skidded to a stop. You're like, on your motorbike and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, because it's when she's finally realized that her entire world has crumbled. Her guru is fake. Her fiance is fake. Mr. Joyboy is fake. The head of the institute has just made a pass on her and tried to deflower her and said that all things beautiful must eventually change.
And she knows that Whispering Glades is going to be leveled and turned into a retirement.
So there is
community.
no place for her. And I love that she paints her own visage.
And all the bodies are going to be sent to outer space.
Yeah. And then I
all
love
the stiffs.
I love, though, when he's deciding to put her in the coffin and he says, eternal grace is not for astronauts. They are men of mundane manner. But like her, she deserves to be in the stars. It's such like a touching and beautiful moment because that really is like where he thinks that she deserves to be. And I don't know. I just loved it.
And then the last big laugh that grabbed me, that made me actually laugh in my belly, all right, is when after that, it's Paul Williams' little face on the TV. Blast off!
Yeah, blast off!
I love Paul Williams.
It's not a rocket.
But just his little face on the 60s black and white television was great.
So for anyone that's interested in watching The Loved One, it's available on Amazon to rent. I actually watched on a Warner Brothers DVD, which I think has beautiful box art. I love the title treatment.
Well, that's the original poster.
Yeah, and I love the title treatment and Rod Steiger's name all big. I bought my VHS. It is the same MGM UA box that Quentin has for $9. And Video Archives bought their VHS on 6/20/90 for $19.95. So,
that makes sense. That was the MGA UA price at that time.
And if you
meant to retail to $29.95.
And if you love Evelyn Waugh, you might want to check out some of his other books. I've never actually read The Loved One, but I think it's high time I do because I have read 4 of his books. I haven't read Brideshead Revisited, but I've read Scoop, Put Up More Flags, Vile Bodies, and Black Mischief, all of which are great. Yeah.
And
I suggest Scoop.
And I've seen the James Ivory Handful of Dust, which I think is based on his.
Yeah.
Little sparrow loves a good place to hide. Life's a road, we'll climb on my pony and ride.
And we're back for our third and final movie. Again, another film that falls into what I would call the revenge-o-matic. This is a very unknown 70s Western called Cry For Me, Billy. It's an unknown 70s Western for the most part, except for true aficionados. But it shouldn't be because it is a true classic 70s cynical, paranoid, violent Western with a little bit of hippie trappings in it that works pretty well as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to read the back of the box.
1972, right?
1972. It stars Cliff Potts, Sochil, and Harry Dean Stanton. And we'll talk about him later, but I actually think the first, even though he's done a lot of stuff, I think the first official, real, truly Harry Dean Stanton performance. It's a media home video. A nomadic gunfighter, Billy, rides into a small town and tries to help a tribe of runaway Indians. His concern for their welfare puts him at odds with the U.S. cavalry guarding the tribe, and he's quickly marked as a troublemaker. When the Indians are massacred trying to escape, only a beautiful young woman survives and takes refuge in the wilderness. Billy's attempts to help the girl are resisted at first, but a love affair quickly develops between the two. Their idyllic life is shattered, though, when the cavalry troopers catch up with them, violate the girl, and drive her to suicide. Left alone, Billy obsessively plans his bloodbath mission of vengeance. Harry Dean Stanton, from Paris, Texas, and pretty in pink, plays the hired gunfighter who befriends the renegade Billy. Approximately 93 minutes. Remember, don't forget, this is a movie. Okay, so same thing on the box. Same thing on the.
I'd rather say Harry Dean Stanton is from Red Dawn. Like, avenge me! Avenge me!
And it would be in the Western section under the seas. Look, I had seen this movie earlier this year. I'd heard about it for a long time, and I was always a fan of the actor, a light fan of the actor Cliff Potts. He was sort of a Robert Redford-ish wannabe Steve McQueen kind of character, and he had his time for a while.
You mentioned he was in Silent Running, playing one of the guys.
Yeah, he's probably the main guy of the other astronauts in Silent Running. He's in this. He's one of the lumberjacks in Sometimes a Great Notion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of the film. I first noticed him because I was a big fan of the film The Ground Star Conspiracy, and he's in that. But then he would pop up in stuff all along the way. His coolest credit is in the mid 70s, like 73, 74. He starred in a TV movie sequel to Nevada Smith, where he played Nevada Smith. And in it was like, so he's playing Nevada Smith and Lauren Green is playing the Brian Keith character.
So it's like a full self-contained, it's like a TV movie.
Yeah, it was it was a TV movie that I think they hoped would become a series.
Like a backdoor pilot.
A backdoor pilot. But it was a big TV movie. Not only that, it also got, I'm trying to remember who the director was, but it's like Gordon Douglas, so like a big Western director, had never done a TV movie before. A big Western director like Gordon Douglas actually came and directed it. And also John Michael Hayes, I believe, who's the guy who wrote the original screenplay for the Carpetbaggers and Nevada Smith, because they're all connected. Also wrote the script for this Nevada Smith sequel. Now, I've been trying to track this TV movie down, and I've never been able to find it. But there's one part about it that I remember very, very well. I remember liking it. I remember him doing a pretty good job in it. But there's one part that I remember very, very well, because it is a little direct sequel to Nevada Smith. Because if you've seen Nevada Smith, Steve McQueen fights all the guys that he ends up fighting. Martin Landau at the beginning, then ends up with Carl Malden. And the whole setup for the film is he wants this vengeance on these guys, and then Brian Keith teaches them how to get the vengeance. So at the beginning of the TV movie, Lauren Green is playing the Brian Keith character, and him and Nevada Smith bump into each other. And so like they have this nice little scene where they, so what happened? What happened with those guys you were after? And I'd never seen that in a sequel. So like a movie that's all about like, I'm going to kill these 5 guys. And then he bumps into a guy a couple years later and taught him how to do it. Hey, so what happened with that? And he answers it. I've remembered it since I was a kid. I saw it like in 73. And he has a really great line because the most memorable scene in Nevada Smith is the knife fight between Martin Landau and Steve McQueen. And he goes, yeah, well, okay, yeah, so I got him all. I got him. I just remember. You made me practice with a gun until I couldn't hold a gun anymore. And what happens? The first guy comes after me with a knife. Which I thought was a really great way for them to like deal with the first movie. Anyway, but I've been a fan of Cliff Potts for a long time, and he still shows up and stuff. And the thing about it is, it's easy to mistake this movie possibly as a lower budget film than it is. It's not a studio movie, but it's involved. A lot of big people are involved in it. Not only is there Jordan Cronenweth is the cinematographer. Elliot Kastner is maybe he gets the credit for producer, but he definitely gets the credit for presents. But that suggests that it's like a backdoor studio movie. Maybe it got the financing from Britain or something like that. But it's not a Corman-like production. It has a studio veneer, even though I don't think they had much money. It still has a studio veneer to it. The way the movie works is it starts off in this cynical, rough place. All these Indians are massacred. This one girl escapes. Billy goes and finds her. They have a long back and forth where she has to trust him. But then they do. And then for about 15 minutes, it becomes a romantic idyll. And that's the part that's actually quite similar in what happens later. It's quite similar to another film that's cut from the same cloth, which is Soldier Blue. Mm-hmm. But also just a lot of like 60s inspired 70s Westerns. They're both meant to be hippies. Yeah. When they actually get together. The woman never says a line in English until towards the very end when she actually gets to call him by name. Yeah. Billy. But like they don't need language.
And she plays almost the entire film, frankly, naked.
Naked, or at least a blanket over her, yeah. But she's quite good in the movie. I really liked her a lot.
She's incredible in the film.
She's terrific in the film. And they have a good chemistry. It was such a good chemistry that they ended up getting married after the movie was over, Cliff Potts and this lady.
And she became Maria Potts.
Mm-hmm, yeah. So it has this friends, hippie, idyllic, if just the world would let them alone, then their love
could blossom.
Blossom. But that's not what happens. The army soldiers that were looking for her before find them, beat the shit out of him, tie him up, rape her, then leave. She unties him, and then she commits suicide. And so now he's out to go and get revenge on these guys. And then that happens in a way that when I first saw the movie seemed more gratifying than it did the second time around. But then it has a really terrific tag at the end that I'm not even going to describe it because I don't want to set it up. I don't want to ruin it. But there's a powerful tag at the end that just makes it a cynical, fucked up 70s Western. Which makes this movie as much a product of its time as The Loved One was a product of its time.
For sure.
I mean, in every way, shape, or form.
For sure.
Everything leading up to it, but the end especially.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I still really like the movie. When I've been trying to watch stuff like this, I haven't liked them that much on the second go around, or at least I have problems with them. But I didn't really have problems with that much with Cry for Me, Billy, except for maybe one thing in the big revenge part. It's just a movie nobody knows about, and it's just such a era of 70s filmmaking and 70s Westerns that I thought I really wanted to introduce it to both you. More importantly, I wanted to introduce it to you, then also to our audience, which is secondary as far as I'm concerned. Well, introducing it to you is the most important part. The audience get what they get.
I had never seen it, and boy, was I happy to see it. Maybe happy is not the right word because the movie's pretty tough. Mm-hmm. In fact, let me just read this old review from Franklin Browner.
Oh, I didn't know that Franklin Browner chimed in on Cry for Me, Billy.
He back in 72, he penned this interview. There is more than just physical nakedness in Maria Xochitl Potts's fully exposed performance in Cry for Me, Billy. The raw, emotional smoting her Apache character must endure multiple times throughout the film is soul-crushing. When Cliff Potts's quick-draw saddle tramp becomes her unlikely and only protector, he is labeled an Indian lover and gets to learn the gun butt's end of intolerance firsthand from a grossly unshaven posse of grimy characters, and possibly makes it worse for her by about 8 times, which is enough to warrant her character's ultimate self-determination. It is worth noting that the difference between a vigilante and a posse is that vigilante is a person who considers it their own responsibility to uphold the law and who does so summarily and without legal jurisdiction, while a posse is a group of people summoned to help law enforcement. This reviewer feels these men are neither. They're just scum. Cry for Me, Billy, 1972.
That was pretty good.
You introduced me to 70s Westerns, basically. You gave me the appreciation for it. You were the one who sat me down and showed me important unknown Westerns. Like, I don't know, Monty Hellman's The Shooting and Ride in the Whirlwind.
Yeah.
And when we watched those movies initially, we talked mostly about the screenplay by Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah, from Ride in the Whirlwind, for sure.
Ride in the Whirlwind. I mean, I to this moment, I can still hear us laughing about man gets hung.
Man gets hung.
Yeah, man gets hung. The vernacular of that film is captured so authentically, at least it feels as though it's captured so authentically, that when people say man gets hung, you feel like, okay, that's real. That's how people really would have talked. And this movie had that.
Yeah, well, this movie actually, I think, has it even a little better than Ride in the Whirlwind, even though I think Ride in the Whirlwind might even be more authentic in that regards, because people were just very unverbal at that time. However, all the movies that we watch that have a very Westerns that have a very strong vernacular going on, where, the people are actually kind of verbose, but they're not the verbosity of people with a college education. They're the verbosity of another time period. Yeah. And even their sentence construction seems different, but there's still something creative about it. Well, all of that comes based at the end of the day. All of that comes from the book True Grit. Yeah, that's all them. Right. Yeah. That's all them taking the dialogue from the novel of True Grit, which was a complete new way of how Western characters could talk. That both told you who they were, but it wasn't a college professor writer putting words in their mouth.
Completely, and probably without True Grit, you probably don't get I don't know, Cormac McCarthy and
you don't get
and Blood
you,
Meridian.
You don't get
like
you do not get Cormac McCarthy without True Grit.
True Grit.
And it really comes across when that old prospector comes by, and lends him the shovel. And the dialogue up until that has been fantastic. I mean, one of the things that's so great about the film is this opening and closing section with Harry Dean Stanton. You don't even realize what him and Harry Dean Stanton are talking about at least half the time in that opening 20 minutes.
You don't need to.
But they know what they're talking about. And it just sounds so fucking authentic.
Yeah.
And it's also what's great about it is it's the emergence of Harry Dean Stanton as the great actor that he will be, because he has been in other things before. But he finds himself in this movie. And from this movie on, he will be Harry Dean Stanton.
You know, when it first began, we have a bunch of Apaches kind of rounded up. Mm-hmm. They're sitting around. They're not being given water. They're sitting in the sun. They're clearly suffering. Mm-hmm. Everybody else in the town is just kind of going about their business and doing their thing. And
and by the way, we have returning from our great demonoid, we have Roy Cameron Jensen, the man who reminds Roger of his father.
My dad was there.
Of his mining father, playing the blacksmith who will end up having quite a bit to do in the movie by the time that it's all finished.
Yeah. Well, here he's got his boot on a bunch of Apaches that they've got rounded up.
Yeah, he's going to break one of their head open with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, and Cliff Potts, shows pity to them. When it began and he started, I'm going to give them the water. At first I was like, okay, come on. My bullshit meter is going off. Who's going to do that in the Old West? Mm-hmm. And I know that it's there so that we know in our hearts that this is like the good white guy.
Yeah.
But when it first happened, I was like, come on, this is a conceit.
Yeah. But it's also there when he doesn't win over the girl immediately, but he's able to say to her, hey, remember me with the water?
Yeah. yeah. So it's her. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't even expecting her. I didn't think she was even a component of the movie. Mm-hmm. But, once the two of them are together and we see their relationship forming, and also that we just see this actress, Maria Xochitl Potts, nakedly running through the film, just bearing everything, and not just naked physically, literally naked emotionally.
I would make it a point even stronger from where you're coming from, remembering how you watched it. You didn't just start plugging into her once their idyllic thing started happening. Correct. You plugged into her when you saw what this actress was being required to do and how she pulled it off with a complete aplomb.
A brave actress, someone who is giving 100%. I mean, look, we know movies are not easy to make. We make it look easy, but at the end of the day,
this was obviously a brutal production.
This is a brutal production to make. When you have an actress who is naked and running barefoot through the winter chaparral, falling and wrestling,
I'm sure this film was difficult on everybody. It was difficult on the crew. It was difficult on Potts. It was difficult on everybody.
I'm sure it's emotionally difficult for the director. Because what you're effectively saying in the film, is about both the worst and the best of people. But it means that you've got to go to the worst of people to do it.
We're back and we're joined by the lovely Gala.
Unknown is an understatement, Quentin, when speaking about this movie. This movie is not available on Amazon. It's not available on iTunes. It's not available for streaming anywhere.
It's not even available on YouTube.
It's not. At one point, there was an account that had it available on YouTube, which no longer exists.
Cliff Potts shut that down.
It's not available on DVD. Mm-hmm. It is only available on VHS.
Right on, baby.
That's right. And by the way, that VHS is beautiful, by the way.
The way I walk is just the way I walk. The way I talk is just the way I talk.
Okay, Babalu.
Maybe even more importantly, this movie is actually not available on torrent websites. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine checked on their very reliable Russian torrent website, where everything exists. This movie does not exist.
Everything used to exist. Those servers are a little under pressure at the moment.
Well, this movie is only available on VHS is what I'm getting at. Except the Germans pulled through for me. Mm-hmm. I found a German dub on YouTube of this movie.
So you watched it in German?
I watched it in German with AI-generated subtitles.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. So you actually had subtitles going on?
Dieser Mann ist unter Arrest.
Well, they're very bad subtitles, so I had no idea what was going on. But this movie on YouTube in German has 1.8 million views.
Oh, really? No kidding.
It has a huge following in Germany, which I kind of went into. But the German name for this movie is Gebrannte Haut, which means bleached skin.
Gebrannte Haut.
Which I thought was interesting. Anyway, I had no idea what was going on in the movie. I really like that little sparrow song, though, that's in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Oh, I did like that little. I liked the little sparrow song.
Yeah.
And I kind of like the Billy song at the end, too.
Yeah, I really liked it. But
again, that was part of the 70s-ness of it all.
Yep.
Because I watched a German version of it, I had to figure out why is there a big German following of the movie? And why is the film so hard to see here? So apparently, the movie itself was supposed to go through Warner Brothers, which was at the time handling films made by George Barry's Brute Productions.
Oh yeah, we never talked about that. It's a Brute movie.
Oh right,
yeah. George Barry from Fabergé. All right, the coolest cologne that I know of in the '70s was Brute. All right,
yeah, and they actually have the Brute logo.
No, all the Brute films have that Brute logo on it.
It's great.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so a couple of other famous films on the Brute line is James Toback's Fingers is like I think the most famous one.
Yeah, Fingers.
But then also there's the black actor Raymond Jacques' directorial debut, the movie Book of Numbers with him and Philip Michael Thomas and Frida Payne is a Brute movie as well. But so is this one.
So apparently the movie showed poorly during its initial testing and was immediately dropped. Warner Brothers ended up...
Too tough.
Yeah, I think it was too tough and too rough. But Warner Brothers ended up dropping all of the Brute movies. I think Magnetic Video made a deal with Brute for their library.
No, they did. This used to be available on Magnetic, and so was Fingers. So was all the Brute movies were available on Magnetic.
The Brute titles with Magnetic home video are considered collector's items. They don't pop up very often. They are very rare. But the movie was so violent that it didn't really go into TV syndication either.
Yeah.
It did play on the On-TV subscription service in the early 80s, so it may have had cable airings elsewhere, but it was a rare showing to be had.
But that was just, but On TV was very special for On TV. You know, it wasn't like if they had the package, then Z and HBO had it.
Selective Vision.
Yeah.
But in the 80s, the Brute Library went into limbo, and the movies went completely out of circulation. I think Turner Broadcasting bought the library, so oddly enough, the movies are actually back at Warner Brothers now, where they first started out. But Cry for Me, Billy has never been made available on DVD or Blu-ray, unlike some of the other Brute videos, and it's not available to stream anywhere. So
I think Fingers is the one that actually got the most play. All right, from the Brute Library, but it does also suggest that somebody still actually has the rights to Cry for Me, Billy. The fact that this exists, and the fact that somebody hasn't been able to put it on YouTube suggests that there's still somebody who owns the rights to Cry for Me, Billy.
And they're protecting it.
They are protecting it.
Yeah.
And the German following, probably just dumb luck. It most likely had a supportive distributor in Germany and a supportive release, which is why the film has more German fans and why people in the comments love this movie.
Germans like Westerns also.
Germans, and also because it's a darker movie, it deals with more difficult themes, I would say. And
also Germans have a particularly because they have their own troubled history. They especially like it when other countries show a movie that shows their troubled history.
It's more of a window to them than a mirror.
Back in the early 2000s, it was actually not widely known that Social's real name was Maria Potts. She actually took the stage name to divert attention away from anyone in the business knowing that she and Cliff Potts were getting married. And she wanted to be able to seek out parts on her own, but they ended up getting divorced only a few years after making the movie.
It means flower in Aztec. Social.
But
what was your take on the movie? Even though you were
honestly,
because frankly, this is a movie that does not need much dialogue.
It doesn't. It was kind of like a visual novel. Honestly, I watched it. I enjoyed the music. The German was actually semi-pleasing to my ears, so I didn't have a terrible time watching it. I'm really happy though because I managed to get a VHS tape of it online for $20.
Oh, you got this one online?
I got the exact same one online for $20. Wow. I'm really excited to actually rewatch it. But you're right. There's not that much dialogue, but a lot was lost on me while watching it in the wrong language.
Well, it's funny. There's not a lot of dialogue, but as we made a point, the dialogue that is there is actually really good and really authentic and actually adds a lot to the film.
Yeah, but it's a visual novel. It was beautiful, but a lot was lost on me not being able to hear what was going on and know what was going on. So I'm excited to rewatch it.
Well, that'll be definitely one of the ones that when you do watch it, we want you to come back and...
For sure.
I started thinking about this movie and that it was like 1972. And I don't normally, for some reason, think of Westerns in the 70s. I hadn't thought of them so much. But really, Westerns were being made up into the 80s, 90s. I mean, still Westerns.
Well, the 70s Western is a genre unto itself. And it's separate from the spaghetti Westerns.
And I looked up like what other Westerns were made in 1972. I was kind of curious about it.
They're almost all bummers.
They're almost all bummers. You got Jeremiah Johnson, with Robert Redford, Sidney Pollack, John Huston and John Milius with Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean, Burt Lancaster in Ulzana's Raid,
which
Robert Aldrich.
Might just be my favorite Western of the 70s, actually, Ulzana's Raid.
Really?
Yeah.
The Revengers with William Holden and Ernest Borgnine, Pancho Villa with Telly Savalas, that counts.
Yeah, any
Chado's Land, Charles Bronson.
All the movies that came out in the 70s that are Westerns for the most part, if it's starring one of the true 70s stars or is meant to be a current movie, then they're all anti-Westerns. All right. Yeah. Where they're looking at Jaundiced Eye at what had been promoted heroically before.
It's revisionist Western.
Yes, exactly. So it's like, Jesse James isn't Tyrone Power, all right? In Jesse James, he's Robert Duvall's talking in tongues maniac killer, all right? Jesse James in the Great Northfield, Minnesota Raid. Billy the Kid isn't Johnny Mac Brown or Paul Newman's brooding method turn in The Left-Handed Gun. It's Michael J. Pollard and Dirty Little Billy.
Right, I was just going to ask you about Dirty Little Billy.
Or it's Chris Christopherson, who plays a Billy who kills with all the callousness of a serial killer.
Sure.
In Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. When you look at the movie Doc, all right, Frank Perry's Doc, with Stacy Keach as Doc Holliday and Harris Yulin as Wyatt Earp. All right. Well, in that, the gunfight at OK Corral isn't so much a gunfight, is just that Wyatt Earp just massacres the Clantons.
Yeah.
Just kills them like a fascist cop. Just massacres them, and the reasons for power and money. So that's where they were all kind of coming from if they were a true 70s movies. Now, at the same time, you still had Andy McLaughlin and Burt Kennedy, all right, making all the movies with all the old timers like Henry Fonda and Jimmy Stewart and John Wayne.
John Wayne and the Cowboys. That same year.
Just knocking off those films, all right, for their dwindling audience that still wanted to see old-fashioned Westerns. In fact, the only guys doing straight Westerns in the 70s that were still fairly young was James Gardner and George Peppard. But everybody else, if they're doing a Western, it's an anti-Western.
It's a cynical Western.
It's a cynical Western, yeah.
Yeah, also just interesting that Rage and Cry For Me Billy are the same year, both revenge films.
I mean, these are Vietnam years that we're living through at that time. And there's a lot of
pain and angst.
Pain, angst, anxiety, a lot of reflection on who we are as a country and what we're going through. And the movies are clearly showing that.
Well, I will tell you, man, Cry For Me Billy and Rage was a pretty great double feature.
Yeah.
That's a really impactful double feature.
Yeah, also Cry For Me Billy just makes me wonder how many other amazing movies are out there that have just been completely kind of forgotten and a little bit lost, because Cry For Me Billy, honestly, it only has, I think, at this point in time, 23 logged views on Letterboxd with no way to watch it. And it makes me a little sad because what I saw of it, I really liked.
I will say that there are a few things out there, but not a whole lot like Cry For Me Billy, where it's not a low-budget exploitation movie. It's still a low-budget film, but it was made with studio...
Made for a price. It was made for a price.
But it was made for studio resources, all right, by top people, and you just can't find it anymore. I don't think that there's that many examples quite like Cry For Me Billy. That there's not a few different reviews floating around for it.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone should go get the VHS tape while they still can.
Yes. Cry For Me Billy would also be good with Posse, which we watched.
It would be very good with Posse.
It's another good one.
Mm-hmm.
Cry For Me Billy with co-hit The Loved One plays December 26th and 27th at the New Beverly Cinema, 7165 Beverly Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90036. For more information, visit thenewbev.com. The New Beverly Cinema, always on film.
Okay, That's awards time.
Yeah, let's hand out some awards.
I think it's easy for me to pick Best Actor for awards because it's definitely, for me, George C. Scott. And for Best Actress, I'm going with Schoschel for Best Actress for Cry for Me, Billy.
So I'm going to go with Rod Steiger as Best Actor.
Okay.
Now, I know that...
I think he's more supporting actor, but I'll go for it. I'll go for it.
I struggled over that.
I would say Robert Morris is the true lead, all right? But I will go... I will allow it.
And I would say that for me, Maria Sochel Potts, for me, she's absolutely the bravest, strongest, and most giving, emotionally bare actress in this.
And I would just say from watching the movie, there was like, it was her performance that drug you in. It was her performance that put fish hooks in you.
Just watching her in the most basic form of life, which was just trying to live and trying to escape and just trying to survive in the elements. And everything within me, the cynic within me, was trying to rebel against the white savior quality of the movie. And yet it won me over because I wanted these two, this Romeo and Juliet of the Old West. I wanted them to succeed. I wanted them to live. And it was crushing in the way that only a 1972 film could be.
And just like the military machine and rage on these two people living out their lives
just trying to live life.
in the wilderness. All right.
Just trying to live life.
Yeah.
I will break lead actor on a technicality with George C. Scott. I really loved his performance in Rage. I think, the whole movie is his performance.
I could almost be talked into that as well.
I mean, just think of him as a father holding his son, running down the hill. The scene where he's...
But what does his face look like?
Do your face.
Well, and also he's directing. He's also directing at the same time, and he's making choices that don't always favor him, but that sometimes favor other actors. And so he's a giving director. He's a giving actor. He's doing everything he can to get his rage across, for lack of a better word.
And I think he did a great job. Lead actress, I'm going to go with Anjanette Comer just because I love her performance on her lines.
Did you write that?
Okay, so for Best Supporting Actor, I think I had planned when we watched it and leading up to now and everything, I planned on giving it to Harry Dean Stanton for Cry for Me, Billy. But our talk about Richard Basehart, all right, moved it back to Richard Basehart.
I get that.
Yeah, it's like that shot that we described with focusing in on him. He is, in his own way, he's as heartbreaking as George C. Scott in his own
conflicted and tortured
in his own private hell way. Maybe even worse because he knows that he sent his patients off wrong.
Yeah,
and it's his responsibility. And not knowing he's abdicating his responsibility, he abdicated it.
He's the one man who recognizes his complicitness in the actions that are occurring.
And we watch him put two and two together when he realizes, and we see that happen with Scott too.
Yeah.
Scott has, at a certain point, realizes he's hearing double talk with Martin Sheen, and that's terrific. But as far as Best Supporting Actress, I think I'm going to go for Barbara Nichols, who plays the astronaut's wife.
Really?
Yeah, the stripper, yeah.
She's actually really good in the movie.
I kind of like her in the film. I was like, who the fuck is that? And
it's
then I
a shameless role. It's a shameless role because she's got to be a kind of a washed out stripper.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed her. In that. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to choose from when it comes to Best Supporting Actress. I'm not going to pick Joy Boy's mother. All right, so
I'll just go along with that. I'll just like sheep, just follow you.
No, you got to pick a Best Supporting Actor.
There's so
Did you not
many.
pick it?
Oh, you mean Best Supporting
Actor?
Oh, Best
and
Supporting
actress.
Actor. Best Supporting Actor. No, I'm sorry. I'm going with John Gielgud. Sir,
okay, there you
Sir
go.
John Gielgud.
I thought you were agreeing too easily.
No. He's
in a different movie. When he leaves, he takes that movie with him.
Apparently, Tony Richardson was just enamored with him, and he was the only one that of all the actors that were in that film that he was like, look, Sir John Gielgud is coming. We must rise to his level. And I think he does in all the Gielgud scenes.
He's great. The Gielgud scenes are fantastic.
Supporting actor, originally I was actually going to choose Nicholas Bovey in Rage because I think the kid does such a good job. But then when we start talking about The Loved One, I start thinking about Liberace, I start thinking about Steiger, I start thinking about Paul Williams.
But you were really into that kid's
I was
performance.
really into that kid's performance. So much so that I was like feeling a little. I'm gonna stick with him, even though I recognize all the great talent in The Loved One. For supporting actress, I'm gonna give it to Eileen Gibbons. She made Quentin nauseous. That's a feat in its own.
She made you feel, Quentin.
And this is why I think she should win.
But you know what?
Actress.
But that kid, what's that kid's name again?
Nicholas Bovey.
Nicholas Bovey. Rage works as a result of the father-son relation, of you caring about this father-son relationship. And it's true. Like George C. Scott is there 100%. He's both as director and fellow actor. He's there for that kid. But
if the kid's performance wasn't as good, the movie might not have been sold to me like it was.
Yeah,
it might not have affected me.
But he didn't go and cast some terrific kid actor that the kid actor is going to have this wonderful part and he's going to really show himself off type of thing. The kid doesn't have very many lines, but he does a really good job of what he has. But the performance really is the connection that obviously Scott developed between the two of them.
Yes.
Now, I actually do think Scott's doing most of the work, but the kid is doing his job.
Yes.
He's doing his job very well.
Yeah.
Well, he's rising up to the needs of his director.
Without being Julia Butters, without being the show-offy actor kid.
Yeah. What about best editing?
Well, best editing for me goes to Hal Ashby. Thank you, Gala, for prompting me on that.
I think I'd probably go for that. Maybe Cry for Me, Billy would be tough.
Let's give best cinematography to Cry for Me, Billy. Cronenweth.
Well, I'm going to definitely give best cinematography to Cry for Me, Billy. All right. I mean, but it's also kind of funny that we're talking about best editing. We're not even mentioning Michael Kahn. Okay. But that's
Michael Kahn has had enough accolades in his career too.
Yes, exactly.
He does not need one from us, although he does a great job trying to calm George C. Scott down.
I do not put the faux pas in the visual scheme at Michael Kahn's feet. In fact, I think he probably made them better.
Oh, for sure. He made everything in this movie better, I'm convinced.
Yeah, I'm team Hexel Wexler for The Loved One for cinematography. I just think, he produced it black and white. He had to paint.
It's true. He's a producer as well. He basically
like the movie was one
together.
of his babies. So I give it to him. And also, in the special features on the disc for The Loved One, hearing him talk about the movie and just the warmth and energy and how he speaks of it with so much love, it just really won me over. And I think the movie is beautiful.
Okay, I'm going to go. I'll start with the director. I'm going with William A. Graham for Cry for Me, Billy.
Yeah. I have to go with Tony Richardson because he's like my dad.
Yes, I got it.
So,
and you love the movie. Perfect.
I absolutely adore the movie. But boy, I would give it to George C. Scott. I would give it to Graham. I would give it to any of these guys.
All three films, even with the problems inherent inside of all three of them, they're all three well-directed movies.
None of them are without problems. You're absolutely right. And all of them are magnificent.
Honestly, I think this week is one of the hardest weeks for awards because I feel like these three movies were all so strong and had so many strong people working on them.
But that makes it all the better.
Exactly.
The hard choices on our part, but good for us.
The hard choices are the good ones.
Yeah.
I like Tony Richardson for The Loved One. I loved hearing about how he kind of messed with the actors and the scene where he falls into the water, the main character falls in the water in The Loved One. It's actually because he was trying to push her into the water.
He was told by Tony Richardson, push her in, push her in. And he doesn't quite and of course, Tony Richardson wanting to create chaos, he tries to push her in, but she accidentally knocks a statue over. And she doesn't fall in. And he tries to protect her from what is obviously a dangerous, large statue falling on her. And he falls in with the statue. So Richardson did exactly what he wanted to do. It which is create chaos.
Just create chaos.
Yeah, so I like it. I'm all for chaos. So
best film?
Okay, best
or best script before best film. I'm team Loved One for the script.
I'm not expecting to break you guys off with The Loved One, but
you know that I have to go with The Loved One on this, and part of that, but I'm trying to determine in myself, this is based on an Yves Lenoir novel. This is an original screenplay, Rage. So as I believe Cry for Me, Billy. Is Cry for Me, Billy based on a book?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. The fact that these are original works means that we can break this off into best original and best adaptation.
We're not going to play that game. We haven't played that game now. We're not going to try to play bullshit.
Darn it! I tried to pull a fast one on you.
Yeah. No way. I think a case can be made that
this is fucking Terry Southern. I'm going to give it to The Loved One. What the hell?
Okay, yeah. I think a case can be made that the Rage screenplay is maybe slightly even better than the Rage movie. All right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so I chose Rage. You guys both chose The Loved One. Best Picture.
Loved One.
Yeah, for me, it has to be The Loved One because every time I see it, it gets better and I understand more about the movie.
And I can watch it endlessly. To be honest, it'll be hard for me to watch Cry for Me, Billy again, just because of the brutality. It's brutal. Mm-hmm. It's a brutal experience to sit through that.
Yeah.
However, I think what I would like to watch in it again is all of the town sequences, the scenes in the town. Like, I love all those scenes in the town and the scenes with Harry Dean Stanton.
Yeah.
I just love watching those two guys together and the whole thing of them being friends. And it's like, there's a little friction between them. Something went down between them that wasn't entirely good.
There's a
little bad blood.
No, as a matter of fact, the way he rides in the town is not too dissimilar from the way I shoot Timothy Oliphant riding into town.
It's like almost the same.
It almost seems the same.
With those inserts of the...
Well, it's in particular, we're both doing the Joseph von Sternberg thing of setting up tracking shots and putting every piece of fucking...
into a tracking shot.
Production design in front of, art direction, in front of the camera as you're following the characters through saddles and through reins and shit.
Making good use of your production.
Barrels and wagon wheels and shit. All right, but not only that, though, the whole beginning conversation that Harry Dean Stanton and Cliff Potts has is very similar to the opening conversation that Caleb Decatu and Johnny Madrid have in my Lancer scene, where they could be friends, there could be friction, it's not for sure, but they definitely have a shared past together that they're both specific about, but vague about the detail. They're specific about the details, but completely vague about what it is.
Well, that's the most delicious scene. And the whole idea that it's sort of like, okay, well, you want to settle this? Okay, well, let's settle it the way we did when we were young.
Yeah.
And then they smile and you realize, okay, we're going to be able to settle this like kids.
And they literally have the weirdest, most dangerous fast draw competition I've ever seen.
Which is where...
I've never seen that ever.
Yeah, where... okay.
No, don't even describe it. Don't even describe it.
Well, let's just say that I'm really glad you and I didn't have a little game like that when we were young.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that is a crazy game.
I would not have an eye.
Because I am not that good
would
at
have fucking bullet holes.
But suffice it to say that it's like this crazy ass game that they play. That you feel like a couple of gunslingers as kids might have actually, or as really young preteens, might have actually been doing.
Well, I actually think it bodes well for Cry for Me, Billy, about the fact that we're not even talking about it for Best Picture, but then you felt the need
to defend it, to return to it,
to return to it, and and make a very good defense.
Yeah, and by the way, and Rage, I think Rage will go into my catalog of of little gems that I will return to from time to time because.
Yeah. Well, I'm choosing Rage as my best film.
Yeah, that's a good choice.
Of the three, and probably is my favorite anyway. All right. But especially this episode, of all of the ones of us reviewing and talking about it, Rage was the one that I started getting emotionally. Yeah. I started emotionally feeling and getting caught up in the emotions of the movie again, the more we double down on the describing of it.
This movie is built on frustration because you're watching it and you're just getting more and more frustrated. And at the moment when everybody goes in there and they basically violate his child in the in the medical examiner's office,
in the autopsy room.
In the autopsy. If you're a parent, even if you're not a parent, it's fucking like mind-numbingly angering. And then when George C. Scott makes the discovery and he just holds on a close-up of himself, almost showing no emotion. And yet screaming emotion. I mean, I'm screaming inside my head.
Yeah, I'll say one last thing about Rage that I think should be taken into account is, and it really jumps out compared to something like The Loved One, which is, complicated. They had a book that they had to figure out how to translate to a movie. Now, I can complain that maybe they didn't pull it off 100% as far as the transfer is concerned. Nevertheless, it's a complicated piece. It's a very, very complicated piece. The thing that should be noted about Rage is it's not a complicated piece. It's a very simple story, very understandable story, very well told. However, this is the movie that we keep coming up with subtextual readings on. Yep. This is the movie we keep talking about the scenes that aren't exactly there, but what we think is in between the lines. And it's not gobbledygook. That says a lot when you have a strong, simple story and you can deliver it in a powerful way. Actually, I would like to see George C. Scott playing in a movie like Rage, directing a movie like Rage, but featuring the supporting cast from Slittus.
With the same attention to detail.
I want to see it with Rex. All right, the Brennigan swinger.
Yeah.
I want to see him with a cop with a cold.
Man who hates nightgowns.
How Rex
I want to see him with Walter Hill.
how Rex's character is contaminated by the MX agent.
He would have done a good job with that cast.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that ends it for today's episode.
Be seeing you.
Awesome. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Up where the white clouds furrow. No more guns.
The Video Archives podcast is hosted by Quentin Tarantino and Roger Avery and produced by Josh Richmond and Gala Avery. Our engineer is Devin Torrey Bryant, and our executive producers are Colin Anderson and Natalie Muellen. Find out more about the show by heading to videoarchivespodcast.com. You can also find us on Twitter @VideoArchives and on Instagram @VideoArchivesPod.
Billy, 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 sing the ballad of Billy. From the day of judgment, the whole world will.
Have you ever wanted to hear Mick Garris discuss the differences between original source material and the movies they become? Or Joe Russo's favorite gateways into horror? What about author Max Brooks and how he thinks that Minecraft will literally save humanity? Join me, reporter on the beat Gala Avery, as I get to the bottom of these topics on my new show, The Gala Show. In this weekly podcast, guests from Los Angeles and beyond have 30 minutes on the clock to bring whatever topic they want to the mic. So, tune in every Thursday for a new guest with an entirely new topic. The first episode drops October 26th, available wherever you get your podcasts.